In the grim dark of the far future, there is only war. Welcome to Dad Hammer 40,000. So we get requested all the time to do this. I hear this at least minimum 3 times a week. Yo, you guys gonna do one on Warhammer 40K? You guys gonna do one on 40K? And it's like, I actually, on my old show, The Bog, which is gonna be coming back very soon, we had like we got requested so much, and my co-hosts were such big 40K fans that we had like a offshoots show called Boghammer 40K, which I knew nothing about 40K going into this. I knew a little bit, right? I had friends that did the miniatures, that played the game. I knew a little bit, right? I knew what Primarchs were. I knew who the Emperor was, all this kind of stuff. But I never like really got into it. I was like, oh, okay, another sci-fi setting. You know, I've already watched Star Wars. I've already read Dune. I tried to read Foundation. You know, I mean, I've been through the settings, right? I've played tabletop games that have expansive settings and all genres. And I'm like, all right, I'm full up on settings. I don't need any more settings. But they're like, no, you have to, you don't have a choice. Everybody here must at least like go down the rabbit hole once. And you know what? I really loved it. I fell in love with it. I to this day, I have probably listened to audiobooks and read books. I probably have 50 Warhammer 40K books, different books under my belt, whether they be audiobooks or reading them or whatever. Some of the Horus Heresy, some of these there, blah, blah, blah. Is whatever I could find on the internet, I just listened to. And I listened to them at work for like, I don't know, probably a year. So I got pretty into it. Since then, I've sort of fallen off a little bit. I have not. I once in a while will turn on a video essay if it's from one of the channels that I like and fall asleep to Warhammer 40K lore, right? There's actually YouTube videos called 40K lore to fall asleep to. That's like, I guess that's like the white man's pastime now. It's falling asleep to video essays with 40K lore. So what we did was we were like, finally, okay, let's do a Culture Dads on Warhammer 40K, because so many of our guys here in the sphere, in the Necromunda, love Warhammer 40K. It's not a secret. It's not a secret that Warhammer 40K is ever present in our world. It just is. It just is. So, we decided to fire it up. And what I did was I gave Mike 2 things. I gave Mike the Imperium of Man lore video, like the big daddy, the one was that guy Luton 09. I gave him that lore video, and I also gave him Hell's Reach, the animated little mini series. He did not get a chance to watch that, but he went down the rabbit hole a little bit, and I think he's ready to talk about it. So, Mr. Mike, I do want to do just a little bit of history of like Games Workshop and stuff, but I want to hear your initial impressions first.
All right. So it's becoming a kind of, something that it happens all the time on Culture Dads. It's the guys are going to be used to this. Mike has not encountered this before. This was his maiden voyage into Warhammer 40K. So when Dave and I decided to do the episode, I was like, all right, I'm going to dig into this MMORPG. I'm like, wait a minute. Start looking into it. I'm like, it's not an MMORPG. Or maybe it is. It's so expansive that there might be one. But I had completely mischaracterized what even it was. So I was kind of unprepared for the size of the iceberg that's beneath the surface here. So it was kind of cool, actually. It was like discovering something that I like didn't even know really existed except for the name. I'm a Philistine. it's yeah. We've this is something that is well known in our spheres, but it is definitely. So my first impression of it really was, well, first of all, holy crap! There's a lot to get under your belt before you can even really sort of understand it or whatever. Like I watched the video that Dave sent me, and I was just like, I'm concentrating very hard on it and like pausing it every once in a while and sort of like rewinding it, just like if I missed something or whatever. I got about halfway through it and I'm like, okay, this is a lot of shit to take in, but I'm getting it. I'm following and everything like that. Got about 3/4 of the way through it. I'm like, I'm just totally lost, dude. It's like, and this is the primer, right? This is just the scratching the surface of the deep lore that's underneath. So I went ahead and just sort of like, got my bearings and like read some like very basic introductory guides to it and like a little bit about the timeline in the universe and everything, and got that under my belt. Went back and watched the lore video, and overall my impression is that it's really cool that something like this exists. I'm very glad that it does, because, and we'll get into this as we go on in our talk here, but it's like it's pissing off all the right people. It's hitting a lot of the right notes. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's like it's cool because it seems to be like it's obviously really dark and really just like kind of like it's got that tragic view of life and everything, but it's like it goes so hard in that direction that it's almost funny.
Yeah.
I mean? Like, I love that. I think that's amazing. It's like really kind of scratches an itch that is really doing something for me. So as far as overall impressions and everything, it's super based, and you could tell because of the reaction of like our guys, just like normal people, and also of like all the people who should be pissed off about these things. But it's such a cultural phenomenon. I can't believe it. It's like it is tapped into something very deep in a wide swath of Western culture. So it's I had no idea. Like I think actually my impression of it, I must have somehow mixed it up in my mind with Warcraft, which is, I guess, what I was expecting, but it's way deeper than that. So,
yeah,
it's cool. It's like, happening upon this like gigantic mountain that you didn't even know was there, kind of things.
I actually believe Warcraft was originally, the video game Warcraft was originally going to be a Warhammer game from the original fantasy setting of Warhammer, which we're going to bring up in a minute. Right. And then I guess Games Workshop pulled the licensing, or they had a legal problem, or I can't remember. I don't remember what happened, but they pulled it, and they're like, crap, well, we got this game that we made that's like, Warhammer 40K. Let's make a knockoff. And they made Warcraft, the video games Warcraft, which I actually really liked the first Warcraft 1 and 2, which are really great games. I never really played World of Warcraft, but I did like the original games. But with Warhammer 40K, so Warhammer 40K actually goes back pretty far. A lot of people don't realize when we're talking about the creation of Warhammer 40K, you got to look at Games Workshop, right? Games Workshop starts in like the 70s. So I can't believe it was 1977 or something like that. A fellow named Steve Jackson, who still makes games, who still makes tabletop games today. Steve Jackson, this other guy, Ian Livingstone, and another guy, was his name? John Peake, right? They start, I believe it's just like a physical store called Games Workshop in the UK. And they would sell board games and tabletop war games. This is coming off of the creation of Gary Gygax's Chainmail and Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, right? This is a big explosion of tabletop games. So they opened up a shop selling this stuff in the UK, and they were pretty successful. And then in the early 80s, I believe 1982, they come out with Warhammer, which is sort of like Chainmail or the numerous tabletop war games of the time, except it was like really their own thing. It had orcs and magic and all this kind of stuff. and they merged with a company called Citadel Miniatures. So they began to create their own miniatures. So they had their own rule set, their own minis that they produced, they manufactured themselves. They were like, doing good. They were doing good business with this. They were being pretty successful. And then about 1984, 85, they come out with a variant of Warhammer, the tabletop game, called Rogue Trader. And Rogue Trader eventually blossomed into Warhammer 40,000 in 1987. Right. So this is where you get, the Grimdark of the far future and all that kind of stuff. And it was like the Space Marines, a few factions. And it was purely a tabletop game with some lore in the books and stuff like that. It's pretty creative. And then going into the 90s, they really just it blew up in popularity, and it started to expand, and they started coming out with books and all this kind of stuff. They had other, tons of novels and all kinds of stuff. And they also started getting into actual RPGs, like RPG tabletop games with Dark Heresy and a couple others. And then then they just blew up all around the world, and that's where they blossomed into what they are today, all around the world, Warhammer 40K. And they've gone through, they've had many, many editions. They are a multi-million-dollar company. I'm not sure if those three guys, I think they had a falling out and Steve Jackson left. And I'm not even sure if the original guys are in charge of it anymore. I think it's like, typical by committee and all this crap. And recently they just came out and they finally started to pause. The Warhammer 40K, like the player base and the fans of 40K have been very successful at gatekeeping it for quite a long time. So it has not fallen to the chaos gods as of until recently. So that's kind of like a little history of how it came to be and all that. But I've only ever played the minis a few times. I got introduced to it. I had a friend when I was in middle school that lived, he was like one of the only kids that like lived in my vicinity. You had to walk across a big farmer's field to get to his house. And he loved Warhammer 40K. He loved to paint. That was his thing. He was a painter. He loved to paint and draw. He was like an art kid. You know what I mean? Like a blossoming art kid that had the natural talent. So he used to get his hands on these 40K minis, because we had a pretty cool little game store that was down the street from our school where we went to middle school. So after school, you could just walk and go to the game store or play hooky or sneak out or whatever, go to the game store, buy what you got to buy, and then come back to school and catch your bus and go home. That's what we would do. We would go together. He would buy Warhammer minis and I would buy Magic the Gathering cards and stuff like that. And, we would go back home. Well, he was really, really into painting these, and I thought he was great. He was awesome. Unfortunately, this is actually kind of sad. This guy. So this guy, he grew up. His parents were very upper middle class, upper crust. They owned a horse farm. His dad was a jeweler and all this kind of stuff. His mom was a very what's the word for it? She's a very snooty, yuppie lady, like just a look down her nose at people kind of lady, right?
Yeah.
Well, hello. That's how she would talk. It's like, bitch, we're in fucking Central PA. Like you're around a bunch of rednecks. Like, hello there. I'm fucking rich horse lady. It's like, you're in the wrong place. You're talking like that. But that's how she was. And my friend, who was just in love with this, in love with painting, in love with art, in love with these settings and everything, she would just berate him and just treat him like shit about it. And eventually he abandoned everything like that. He abandoned all of his gaming stuff. He abandoned painting and art, and now he's like a very lonely. He's married in like a very loveless marriage where both partners are just all about work, and all they do is work, and they're childless, and they're miserable and they cheat on each other and have no joy in life. So I love those things are connected, but I think so, because I remember as a little kid, this is what Warhammer 40K brings to my mind. Is my friend who was this very artistic, creative, imaginative young guy, and it's not like he was like a nerd. He was actually he was like one of the kids that was like a giant, was like 6 feet tall when he was like 9, right? Like taller than the teacher in elementary school. And he grew up to be a real big guy. So it's not like he was like a little bitch, little nerd guy. He went out and he worked, and he was a hands-on dude. But he also, this was his passion thing that he would do. And his mom just would not leave him alone about it. She hated it. She would do all this kind of stuff. And I remember one day we go over there. I'm like, yo, did you get the, I can't remember what he got. Like, he was like so pumped to get this new faction or whatever. And he's like, no, I didn't get it. And I was like, why? He's like, oh, yeah, I'm just not into that anymore. I was like, where's your armies? He's like, oh, my mom threw them out. His fucking mom threw him out. So it's like, yeah. So, and I remember on that day that he told me that, I go look around his room. He used to have this little desk where he had all of these like sketchbooks and little easels, and he was like a masterful painter, but for being 13 years old or whatever, he was pretty darn good. He had a lot of talent, and with some training, he probably would have been a really good painter. He would have been a really talented guy, but all of it was gone. There was no drawing or art to be seen. And I was like, I remember thinking, it's like, oh my God, like, fucking, is this what these kinds of people are like?
Yeah.
And it's just sad. It was just sad. So that's what I think of with 40K. I remember this, and me and this guy are not really friendly anymore. Like, he's a completely different person. He's not the kind of guy I want to hang out with. And, I don't have any hatred for him or anything like that, but we're not boys anymore. But, so that's what I think of. And I think of, how people who really, really fall in love with these kinds of things like Warhammer 40K, and fall in love with these grand settings, whether it be Dune or Lord of the Rings or whatever, and they go all in, and it inspires them, and all this people that are just your typical conservative utilitarian, only care about the big line goes up and don't understand imagination and art and things like that. They just will never understand you. And unfortunately, if they are your mom, they will try to cut it from your soul like a cancer.
Yeah, that's very sad. I don't know. As I gotten older, I don't know. When I was younger, teenager and verging into adulthood or whatever, I was like, I completely bought into what my civilization had taught me, which is, well, basically the civilizational firmware that it gives you is to say, fuck you, dad. That is the imperative at the heart of our culture, which is really, really disgusting. It's what the modern West has become, right? It's about rebellion. It's about go your own way. It's about fuck you to the past and tradition and everything like that. So having internalized this idea, basically in a kind of incoherent way, it's like it tells you to reject your parents, but that's what they did. So really you're kind of following tradition, which is rejecting tradition, which is following, you know what I mean? It's kind of this incoherent thing or whatever. But anyway, I bought in hook, line, and sinker to the idea that you needed to strike out on your own, that you needed to go and chase your wildest dream that you have in life. And that because if you don't, that when you get old, if you follow a conventional lifestyle of family and career and on community and all that stuff, that when you're old, you'll be full of regrets and you'll think, oh, well, what could I have been? And, so on and so forth. Right. So I kind of, in a way, I pursued the exact opposite path of your friend or whatever. Cause I had parents who were like, because my life's ambition was to be a musician, right? Mm-hmm. And I made a real go of it, and it didn't work out. But my parents were supportive, though, and like, you know, a lot of the people, like I was a computer programmer when I was like, had decided that I was going to like leave my hometown and go like make a go of it as a musician and have a career and everything like that. And I remember the guy that I was working with, which was this, like I was about 21 or 22 at the time, so a young guy. But the guy I was working for was even younger. My boss was like this like 19-year-old guy who was a absolute like social climber dude. Like he's definitely weaseled himself into some like upper management position in some company now. That's just what he was doing. That's what he was all about. And he could not understand. He's like, Mike, you're really good at programming, and you know you've got like a career ahead of you and everything. What the fuck are you doing? And I'm just like, I don't want to be old and like bitter about like you know doing a job I hated or didn't want to do and everything. So whatever. Anyway, that was what I was taught, and that's what I did. I did for many, many years. I was a musician and all of that, and tried to make a go of it in the arts field. And quite frankly, I failed. I mean, realistically, I did not really ever make enough money to make ends meet until I basically stopped being a musician and then kind of like went into doing like technical stuff, like as an audio engineer and all that. So I definitely like, I feel for your friend. And like when I hear you describe like his mom and everything, it's like I've met that lady and fuck her, you know, like fuck that person. That's bullshit. Like imagine your child and how he feels about you denigrating his like passion. Like holy shit. So I'm not defending her by any stretch of the imagination. But I kind of like, I understand from the other side of the coin where it's like, I kind of wish my dad had like slapped me around a bit and been like, don't be an idiot. Give it 4 years and then call it quits. You know what I mean? There's something like that kind of thing. So anyway, I don't know. It's just that came to mind or whatever, but definitely, you know, it's wonderful to have parents who are supportive of this sort of thing. Like when I was that age, you know, that when you and your buddy were back in the day, I was getting into Tolkien and everything. And, you know, it's it wasn't the hobby that Warhammer 40K was. It was just a book that I really, really enjoyed a lot, but, you know, they were supportive of it, and they were like, you know, with my video game obsession, they were into that. And, you know, guitar was really that was my big hobby when I was younger, and they were really supportive in that. So that's really, really cool. I had wonderful parents, but, with Warhammer 40K, that's a whole other sort of kettle of fish in terms of what's involved. I think it's worth sort of breaking down for guys like me up until today, who have had no experience of what it is. It's so ostensibly it is a tabletop war game or a miniature war game or whatever, right? But it's a lot more than that. This is and this is something that was like, wow, I did not expect it. It's such a multifarious hobby, right? It's many things to many people. Different people sort of like interact with it in different ways. Mm-hmm. You can interact with it as a tabletop game, like for like, you know, Dungeons and Dragons or so many other things. It could be a social event. It could be a craft hobby like it was for your friend, you know, painting and miniatures. Like there's some people who that's all they really do. They don't really, I mean, they'll play the game, but they don't get serious about it. They don't like really, you know, care too much about the lore and everything. Some people interact with it as a video game. Some people interact with it as literature. I mean, even within literature, there are a wide range of genres that you'll find Warhammer 40K lore or literature. There's like, obviously there's fantasy and sci-fi and horror, but, you know, there's also like pulp style adventure stories. There are comedies and things like that. Like there's just, it's a huge, I had no idea of the size of this fucking mountain when I started looking into it. And it's ridiculous. It's crazy. So the lore of like the universe itself, which would, you know, be way beyond the scope of the podcast to describe, is so there are several ages. I mean, the 40K, it's set in our universe. It's not like a parallel universe. It's set in our universe, but 40,000 years in the future. And there are like several ages that like follow the time, like our current time. One of which there is an episode. It's not a minor episode, but it's like just one of many of like several ages in the lore behind this game. It's called the Horus Heresy, and there are 50 books that have been written. And this is like official. You know, we're not talking about fan fiction or anything like that.
Nope,
like
canon.
Yeah, there are 50 books that are totally canon that are released by or, you know, licensed by the original manufacturer just about this one episode. That is like one episode within an age, within a lore, like, you know, framework within the game. You know what I mean? So it's like, It gives you a bit of an idea of the scope of the thing. This is like, you could spend the rest of your life, like you could study this. It could be a field of like academic study. It's so huge. You know what I mean? So anyway, that just gives guys an idea of like what it is, the sort of like scale of the whole thing, which is, I think it's important to understand, because first of all, I had no idea myself going into it what it was, if it was just like, you know, a few Harry Potter books, or if it was like whatever. It's just absolutely fucking massive. But it's also the originator of a genre, right? Of the Grimdark genre. Arguably, it's certainly the one that most people think of, I believe, when it comes to this particular genre, which is something that's really salutary and that gets under the skin of progressives. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But it's amazing because, you know, in the 21st, or sorry, what was it? The 41st century or whatever it is, in the grimdark future of the 41st millennium, there is only misgendering. You know what I mean? It's just like it's so masculine.
Only pause.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely hilarious. You know, it's funny because it's, my gosh, I've never read anything in terms of like, you know, because I did dig into a little bit of the criticism of Grimdark and Warhammer and everything like that. Boy, I have never ever read clustered together in such a dense, you know, area, so many instances of the word adolescent male fantasy.
Yeah.
About this. And that's, I mean, in some ways that's exactly what it is, right? Because it's like, it's gigantic robots and like, you know, humans in the far-flung future with like, you know, unimaginable technology, wielding unimaginable weapons, you know, doing violence at a scale that is just incomprehensible. You know, it's all this stuff, right? It's everything that like, you know, adolescent male boys like. It's awesome.
Yeah, Grimdark in and of itself has gained legs. That's not something to be underestimated. Grimdark is a genre now that people love, and so many writers, you know, write in it. And what's very interesting about it is the reactions to it and the misunderstanding of it. So I write a lot of. You could say I am a Grimdark writer. Right. You could say Dave Martell is a Grimdark writer. Almost everything I write is Grimdark. I very rarely write something that is, you know, the opposite. Some people would classify that. They call it noble bright, but I think that that's corny. I don't like that classification. But Grimdark is something that a few different factions react to. Right. You have your progressives despise it for the most part. Unless they're, dude, I know guys that are like, you know, your basic bitch, secular, liberal, humanist, kind of like fucking retards, right? And they like love 40K. And if anything about 40K got even paused in the direction that they would like, they would take issue with it because they love 40K more than they have their ideology, right? and that's like guy shit. You know, that's their guy, bro, fucking nerd, whatever. That's their like culture dad instincts overriding their liberal firmware, right? But for the most part, progressives despise grimdark, and I see this all the time. So one thing that's really, really gay about modern publishing is publishing agents, literary agents, will give you a list of things that they like, right? Which is just bizarre to me. I think a literary agent should just be like, okay, well, if you're good, we'll work with you. They don't. They will have a list of things that they like and don't like. And if you are one of these or write one of these things, they will immediately reject you. And obviously, many of them now will have cis white male under like immediate rejections and shit. Like they literally just put it there. They literally write it and they will email it to you if you contact them. Like there's no secret. They don't even hide it. If you're a cis white male, that they will not do business with you. However, on below it, in among things that they will immediately reject is always, always, always grimdark. They will never, ever. They absolutely are repulsed and allergic to grimdark. And there's a few reasons for this in my summation. Firstly, it just like blows out progressivism. Grimdark, first of all, grimdark almost it almost always happens in the future, right? The grimdark, like there are like I write grimdark fantasy, but grimdark is a lot of times in the future. And why this is problematic is that it blows apart their presuppositions that in the future things will get better. Like things aren't going to progress. Technology isn't going to liberate them. They're not going to be liberated going forward. And they can't handle this. They don't want to see that. That just completely blows apart the entirety of their religion, right? And also, as Mike has talked about with the thing with harm, right? They don't want to see harm unless it's done against their political enemies. They can't stand harm. That's something that they don't want to see. And grimdark is nothing but harm.
Yeah.
Another faction of people that are repulsed by grimdark are your straight-laced, conservative kind of people, right? The people that are like, they say this all the time. They say, well, my heroes don't do bad things. And they will point to like Superman as their heroes. They absolutely despise grimdark. They hate it. It makes them like want to puke because every hero to them must be this like clean-shaven truth and justice in the American way, and like kind of character that I never fucking blah blah blah. That's what
a Mary Sue character, basically.
Yeah, they literally just only want Mary Sue's, and to them, something like Warhammer 40K, where there are. Let's get this straight. Warhammer 40K, and I've said this before. What's that guy, Steve O'Bannon from the Alien movies? He goes, I didn't steal from anybody. I stole from everybody. Warhammer 40K has stolen from fucking everybody. It has taken everything that everybody likes from everything and smashed it all together into this absolutely just gigantic, beautiful Frankenstein. You have, obviously, Star Wars is in there, Dune is in there, Lovecraft is in there, Sword and Sorcery is in there, Lord of the Rings is in there. Fucking anything you can think of from the worlds of fiction, Warhammer 40K has already subsumed it and turned it into something that is within their setting. And there's nothing you can, think of one. I challenge you guys. Think of one and then Google what you're looking for, what you're thinking of with Warhammer 40K. You will find it. I guarantee. There's everything in it. It's unbelievable. But I forget what I was talking about here.
Yeah. No, we were just talking about how much progressives fucking hate it.
Grimdark. So
yeah, grimdark. Yeah.
The purpose of grimdark is not it. If you're in a world where everything it's not that just grimdark goes hard, which it does. It does go hard. And it's not necessarily about hopelessness, which is what its critics will say. I don't want to exist in a world without hope. I don't want to exist in a world where we can't win and blah, blah, blah. And that is the crux of Grimdark. The crux of Grimdark is that there is no victory, that things are so dark and so grim that you don't even really truly know what the bad guys are or who the good guys are. The good guys are those who help you survive, and the bad guys are those who are trying to kill you. And a lot of times the good guys, by your morality walking around today in real life, don't really classify as good guys. They're just they're men of power, and they kill guys that are trying to kill you. And a lot of times you either by necessity of survival have to ally with them, or you are subjugated by them because they are of superior power.
And this is really the traditional mode of heroism, right? Like if you look at the Iliad, who is the hero of the Iliad? Well, it's Achilles, but it's also Hector, and they're on opposite sides of each other, right? And both of them are not perfect. Like Achilles is like, he's rash, and he kind of like, he fucks over his own people and stuff like that. Like there are no sort of Mary Sue characters in Homer. There are no Mary Sue characters in Greek tragedy. Like they're all flawed heroes. That's the whole idea of tragedy, right? Like you can't have a tragedy without a flawed hero.
And you can't have a hero without flaws. Yeah,
at least not one that is anything other than an archetype or like a caricature or something like that. So,
and what's
yeah.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
So what's interesting about the Emperor is that he has no flaws, right? He has no flaws. He is always right. Now, what he is not is always nice.
Yeah.
So that is what a lot of these people have to come to terms with, and they can't digest that. Is that this guy who's supposed to be the shining hero of all of humanity and oversees millions of planets and all this kind of stuff is a guy that is completely willing to just like wipe your planet if you disobey him. He will fuck you over if you disobey him. If you do something he doesn't like he is a by his will, right? It is his will. It is like divine command.
And he's also sacrificed for the greater good, right? Like the corporativism is kind of coming in here because, he sacrifices, there are 1,000 souls a day are sacrificed to sustain his life. You know what I mean? It's for the greater good of the Imperium. So it's this is something that progressives have a big problem with. They talk about things like community and everything like that, but when it comes down to it, it's really other people that have to make the sacrifices, and that they themselves are just, sovereign individuals, and you can't encroach on their human rights and blah, 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 right? Like if they were the ones that were going to be thrown onto the pyre and we're going to be fuel for the Imperium's like sacrificial state cult, yeah, that's when the extent of their community feeling kind of ends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that aspect of what's going on in the lore is like deeply repulsive to them too.
And also the totality of 40K is the great man theory.
Yeah.
Right. It is great man theory amplified to 40,000. Right. It is. Yeah. It is. And to close up my thing about Grimdark, the purpose of Grimdark is not to stamp out and to extinguish hope. It is to amplify it. Right. Because in a world where things are dark as fuck, when there is a glimmer of hope, it is like shines way brighter. Right. In the 41st millennium, when they have to go on holy crusades against the Tyranids and against the Orks and against the Chaos gods, these insurmountable foes that they can't truly defeat any of this. They can only ward off the tide. They can only push it back. And in that is so much more important. So just to give guys, we're kind of like going back and forth and everything. We're probably so just to give guys just a quick primer on Warhammer 40K. I'm not like a total 40K scholar, right? There are guys out there that could do it better than me. I'm very, very amateur with this. But pretty much the story of 40K is a long time ago on Earth, a great man appeared. This great man created super soldiers. These were called the Thunder Warriors, I believe. His origin is unknown, really. It's up to speculation. He then unified the planet under his rule. They then created a great age of technology, and he created what were called the Primarchs, who are like the next generation of Thunder Warriors. I believe he killed all the Thunder Warriors because they couldn't be controlled. And then he creates these Primarchs that are like his sons. They're off of his gene seed, and he throws them throughout the galaxy. And then he goes around and unites them. And, then they open up what is called the warp, which is their way. It's like this like inner dimension thing that they use to do deep space travel. And when they did this, they opened up all kinds of horrors of the universe. They, then they like became part of the food chain of the universe. So they, a bunch of crap happened, and they did like a Butlerian jihad type of thing and outlawed thinking machines. So instead of computers, they take human beings and put their brains and their souls into these like servitor floating skulls that go around, and they outlawed all kind of like technology except for this like one cult who are called the Adeptus Mechanicus, and they live on Mars, right? And there's a bunch of other stuff too. But effectively, what goes on is there are kind of two main factions that they beef against. You have the Xenos, who are like the aliens. You have the Tyranids. You have the Orks. You have the Tyranids, the Orks. There's a couple others too.
There's quite a few of these like other races, and the Xenos is really a catch-all for just anything that's not a human, really.
Yeah.
But there's so many of these different like races and things like that are hostile to the humans and arch enemies and everything like that.
Yeah. So yeah, you have and they're like really, really cool. They're really, really cool. You have all these guys. And then you have the chaos gods, right? And there's like 4 main chaos gods. And the deal is with the chaos gods is they're almost like Lovecraftian entities that live in the warp, right? And you have Nurgle, who's like the god of disease. You have Tzeentch, who's like the god of like ambition or something like that. Then you have Slaanesh, who's the god of like decadence and degeneracy and depravity. And then you have Khorne, who's the god of slaughter. Blood for the blood god! Yeah. And what these guys do is they are trying to convert humanity and all of the everybody to worship them, because the more worshipers that they have, the more powerful they become. So what the emperor says is that religion is not allowed, and even to worship him is not allowed in the Imperium of Man, because it gives power to these wicked entities that corrupt mankind. So what happens in this is that a bunch of his Primarchs, his sons, who are the most second to him, the most powerful beings in the universe, fall to the corruption of these deities, right? This one guy falls to Khorne, one guy falls to Nurgle, another guy falls to Slaanesh, and they become corrupted. And this kicks off the Horus Heresy. And the Horus Heresy is this absolute like galaxy burning, billions of planets, annihilated, just unfathomably large civil war where Horus and the Primarchs on his side go towards Earth, which is called Holy Terra, to like kill the Emperor and take him over. And it's fucking insane. It's absolutely insane. And they have this incredible showdown on Earth where a bunch of the Primarchs die, and the Emperor kills Horus, but he in the process is like killed too, sorta. So they have to keep him like barely alive, a like living corpse on the golden throne, which Mike said they have to sacrifice all these people. And now they're kind of like they're at this like really dark time where the Emperor is in this like stasis of living corpse and doesn't really communicate much. So it's like a really, really dark time. So it's pretty crazy. That is just scratching the surface.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, you know, like I said earlier, I watched an 1.5-hour video of lore, and it was just like a primer of all of this stuff. And there's so much deep lore to this. Probably more deep lore to Warhammer 40K than anything I've ever seen before. That isn't like real life. You know what I mean? And obviously, you know, there's turbo violence. There's like intergalactic battles. There's like crazy like technology and all of this stuff. It's not exactly realistic. It's fantasy. But the basic sort of backbone, the basic philosophy behind it is a valid and realistic philosophy, right? The grimdark genre, that reality is not like, you know, there is not something nice and benevolent and kind behind reality as so many people think. And I think this is part of why like, you know, conservative types don't like grimdark, right? It's very anti-logos, you know what I mean? It's very against the idea that the universe is fundamentally at its bottom an orderly place. There are forces of order, but they have to keep order, and there's no guarantee that they will, sort of thing, right? And that this is something that has to be this kind of like orderly environment, like the orderly view of the world, is something that's earned. There's a wonderful Carlyle quote that kind of like goes to the heart of this, where he says something like, you know, in terms of that, like basically the idea is that in order for you to have a functional society, that basically the road to that is paved with fucking heads. You know what I mean? Like people kind of have this naive and childish idea that like 2023 with our wonderful iPads and like, you know, electricity and air conditioning and wall-to-wall carpeting and all of these wonderful things have just sort of like spontaneously popped into existence, and that we're kind of owed all of this stuff, and that, you know, there's, you know, violence is a thing of the past, and that there's no like need, that we've evolved, and all this like gay fucking bullshit. And Carlyle has a wonderful quote that it just like totally undercuts all this. It goes something like, there has always been unwritten, but a law, but this law may be unwritten, but it's real, it's fundamental, it's prior to all written laws, and it's what makes written laws possible. There must be, there is, and there will be coeval with human society from its very beginnings to its end, martial law. And this martial law has more validity than any other fucking law whatsoever. That's basically like the gist of what Carlyle is saying. You know what I mean? So he is essentially expressing the worldview and the philosophy behind the Imperium of Man and the Emperor. You know what I mean? It's like, and the grimdark genre completely leans into this worldview. It's a might is right worldview, and there are problems with that, of course. I mean, might is right is something that is it's a problem, but it is a kind of a realistic view of reality, right? The grimdark genre is kind of amoral. It's very realistic in its assessment of, you know, human flourishing and all of that. And when progressives like kvetch about it, they hate the idea that it's realistic. They try to tell you that it's not realistic and that, like, you know, that it's oversold as such. But it is very extreme. Grimdark, it's violent and creative. Really what it is actually is it's Odinic. It's exactly what we mean when we say all of that stuff. And this is why it's dark. You know what I mean? And this idea, it can verge into, like, grimdark can sometimes verge into dangerous territory at times, right? Because, like, it's now, I mean, like, art shouldn't have morality as its goal, and this is ultimately what these progressives want to do. They just want to, like, you know, basically put art into the service of their morality, right? Sometimes, though, an amoral setting can be used to undermine like certain things that are true and certain things that are good, right? I think of something like Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? Game of Thrones is, I would consider that a grimdark setting. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But what Game of Thrones is kind of doing is it's undermining the idea that power can be wielded benevolently. Everybody in Game of Thrones is a fucking asshole. You know what I mean? It's kind of like if you took that Lord Acton quote that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and you tried to write a whole series around that, that's kind of what you would come up with. And this is actually not realistic. It's not realistic, the idea that everybody in power is just out for themselves, you know. It almost seems to be like Game of Thrones is kind of like the fantasy of what power would be like, written by a guy who's never ever come within sniffing distance of power. So this is just to say that grim settings can be used to bad ends, you know what I mean? Or they could be used to good ends, something like Warhammer 40K, which enshrines basically authority and you know, corporativism and all these really good things. But it is, you know, very pessimistic, right? It's kind of, you know, when I was looking into the lore and coming to grips with it for the very first time, it really actually reminded me a lot more of like OG sci-fi. You know what I mean? Because OG sci-fi is very fucking pessimistic. It's pessimistic about technology. It's pessimistic. Well, pessimistic is wrong. It's realistic, right? It's realistic about technology. It's realistic about its assessment of our relationship to it, right? It's realistic about cyclical history. Like there is technological progress, right? And then for various reasons, you know, good times make for weak men and so on and so forth. We then regress, whether it's through dysgenics or war or something else. But, you know, there isn't this like rosy progressive view in OG sci-fi, nor is there in Warhammer 40K, right? Forget progress. There's fucking war, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole idea that like what underlies it is this idea that I think might is right. There's something there in the lore that's like kind of like barking up that tree. And might is right is not something that we should like wholeheartedly just lean into and endorse, because it is a bit of a problem, right? The whole thing about might is right is that whatever wins is good. And this is probably not what we should be thinking about. And really, we shouldn't be endorsing that as dissidents, you know what I mean? Or people who are not pleased with the way that like the world is moving, right? But when you think about it, I mean, this is a very old idea. The idea that might is right. There's an old anecdote I think it's in Herodotus, but I'm not sure, where after the Greeks sort of like get together to like BTFO the Persians in the Peloponnesian War, Athens and Sparta, they each basically fought over Greece and tried to like master the whole thing or whatever. And this led to the Peloponnesian War. I'm sorry, I had the name wrong before. But it was like a bunch of small cities that were kind of like getting shit on and like, you know, smashed and burned or whatever by these two great powers or whatever. There was this one little place called Milos that the Athenians, it was like basically a Spartan colony or whatever. And the Athenians took it over. And before they killed them all, they basically gave them a chance to surrender, right? And there's a famous quote from that people still say, which is that they said something like, "We hope that you will, like, you know, listen to reason and everything like that, since you know as well as we do that the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must," right? This is the idea that might is right kind of thing. And I think it's actually hilarious that this is like the Athenians are saying this, and this is like, you know, verging on the time of Socrates and stuff like that. You know, the fucking Athens, which is like, you know, the cradle of democracy and then like a philosophy and like rights and justice and everything like that, is like, when it comes down to it, that is what is at the bottom. That is what is at the bottom of things. All these things about like rights and justice, basically what it comes down to is it comes down to obeying legitimate authority, and legitimate authority is that which has power, right? So it's a tough question. Like Might is right. That's a very difficult question. And I think something like Warhammer 40K is like, okay, it is kind of a little bit like of a caricature. It's a little bit sort of like, what's the word? It's just like pushing everything into almost like a satirically turbo-violent direction, but it's actually wrestling with like real questions, right? The Emperor himself is, as Dave said, he's not a nice guy, but he's necessary. He is good and perfect, and he makes the right decisions. But sometimes he makes decisions that seem cruel, that seem to like use people for as ends and not means, or as means and not ends in themselves, that kind of thing, right? Whatever. So it is it raises some very difficult questions about Might is right. And of course, there's other things that the progressive fucking hates too, right? The idea that ancient technology and ancient knowledge beats modern technology, that later ages might actually be reduced to just maintaining the technology from earlier ages. And I mean, this has got to sort of like hit home to them. Like I can understand in like the 90s at the end of history when everything seemed to be sort of like going very swimmingly for liberal democracy and like all of that shit. I can understand how it like might have been not as much of a sore spot back then, but right now, like we're in a kind of a different, we're starting to decline, and everybody can see it. And it hurts progressives to see that shit, right? Like you think from 1850 to about 1950, we went from burning whale oil to splitting the fucking atom, right? Like there was a lot of progress that was made in that time from 1950 to now, which is like, 3/4 of the way of the same time frame. It's like we haven't had nearly as much progress, and we're actually kind of having problems maintaining the technology that we do have. Like, do you really think that we could go to the moon again if we had to? It would be a challenge for us. I think that would be like if we had to build that technology from scratch today. I don't know. I don't know if we'd, you know what I mean? It's a question. We're definitely starting to decline in intelligence. This much is clear. The BBC has admitted that. So, things are starting to go down, and technology is starting to, like, we're not able to produce some of the constituents that are required to build like nuclear warheads and so on and so forth. It's like they just have to basically poach that stuff from existing stock that hasn't been used in 70 years or something like that. So technology progressing is not a guarantee. And this is starting to become very, very clear, and it hurts them because their whole worldview is basically is predicated upon that. So Warhammer 40K kind of rubs their nose in it. Shit can go backwards, right? So They really don't like it. There's so many things about 40K that are just like real, that sticks in their craw. It's actually kind of funny.
Yeah. And one thing that's actually pretty interesting about Warhammer 40K, one of them is kind of the tribalism that goes in with the kind of like, I hate the word fandom. I hate the word fandom, and I hate using the word community around these types of things. What can I say? I guess you could say the fan base. Let's call it the fan base. One thing that's very interesting around the fan base is the tribalism around it, because unlike Star Wars, which I've actually been watching the shit out of Star Wars with my boys, they're like falling in love with it, the original Star Wars stuff. They love Darth Vader, which here's another thing that's really, really interesting. Both of my boys love Darth Vader. He is their favorite. When he comes onto the screen, even if his music doesn't play, they both go, da, 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 da. They do his music. Like they just like get so excited when he comes on. Darth Vader is proposed as evil in the whole movie. They never give Darth Vader any. Star Wars is pretty much liberal propaganda. It just is. I mean, as much as exciting as it was, and as fun to watch as it was, and as much as we love a lot of the characters and the voices and the stuff, it was George Lucas's liberal propaganda. It literally just has moral judgments as like prefixes to it. The evil empire, the dark, evil Lord Vader. It never ever gives him, a point. Like there are a few points in dialogue where he like kind of makes a case. For example, in Empire Strikes Back, like towards the end where he fights Luke, and he's like, "Join me, Luke, and together we shall destroy the Emperor and rule the galaxy and bring order." And like he says all this kind of shit. That's like the only time he really is given agency, and like you get to see things from his point of view. But for some reason, my boys, we actually watched that movie last night. We watched it. We made popcorn, which, by the way, guys, pop your own popcorn and melt real butter and put it on. No salt, nothing like that.
Oh, it's so good.
It's like you don't need salt. You don't need nothing. It's got a sweetness and a creaminess. It's just the best way to eat popcorn. You can't beat it. So anyway, we get our popcorn. We get our we made up some lemonades and we watched Star Wars. And that scene in particular, they're both like, "Dad, why didn't Luke join his dad? Why didn't Luke go with his dad? Why didn't Luke join Darth Vader?" Like that didn't make any sense to them that he would say no. That he would like say
it
no.
It kind of doesn't make sense, It's your dad, right? Your dad can't be wrong, can he?
It's your dad. He's got an awesome, cool, like black armor suit. He's got cool entrance music. He's got a red fucking lightsaber. He's like fucking cool. You know what I mean? So it's like the rule of cool, the coolness factor of Darth Vader, like in my boys' minds, completely overrides all of the moral judgments of the movie. And they completely just get, anytime he makes any sort of sense, they're like, yeah, he's right. Right. So this is what's different about Warhammer 40K is it has a lot in common with Dune, where each faction in Dune it's not moralized. You could see where Paul Atreides is coming from. You could see which Paul Atreides and his son becomes the God Emperor, right? This is exactly Warhammer 40K literally borrowed that from Dune, and there's many other things that they borrowed from Dune. But anyway, you could see where he's coming from. You could see where the Emperor is coming from. You could see where outside of with Harkonnen, outside of him being a gross pervert and everything, you could see where he's coming from. You could see where the what are they called? The Tlilaxi or whatever. You can see where they're coming from. You can see where everybody's coming from. It's not this like duality, good versus evil. It is a bunch of factions who are out for their own interests or their own survival, their own success, and they make sense, right? It makes sense. And it's this ecosystem of competing factions competing for power, just like real life. And in Warhammer 40K, even among like the fallen Primarchs who fall to Nurgle and fall to Slanesh or whatever, when you listen to the apologetics, I guess you could say, of the Chaos Gods, when they seduce people, you're like, fuck, that makes sense. Right? When you listen to Nurgle and he's like, the beauty of rot and decay. There is only one truth of all reality, and that is life must rot and die. And he says that this is a beautiful thing, and he can never be defeated because he in himself is the most truest part of nature. He is the only living truth of nature, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you're like, fuck, he's got a point. You know what I mean? So it's like, in Warhammer 40K, you have all of these like different members of the fan base that like glom on and identify with different factions and different Primarchs and different characters, and they fucking beef with each other. Yeah, like legit, like the guys that are
they'll be like a throwdown at the convention or whatever.
Yeah, like sometimes it gets heated. I go through. That's like I don't know why, and it might be cringe and it might be a simulacra or whatever, but I think it's fucking fun and like hilarious that guys that are boys that are like, they're like, no, we're the, and this usually coincides with the factions that they play as, right? Like it could be like Lionel Johnson in the Dark Angels or Layman Russ and the Space Wolves or whoever, right? The Blood Angels and whoever. They are the Ultramarines. People like identify with these factions, and they will literally beef with other members of the fan base over whose faction is better and more right and more correct, and who got fucked over worse, and they get like really get into it. And I think that it's a simulacra, and it's probably a little bit unhealthy or whatever, but I think that it's kind of cool and fun and interesting. And the fact that Warhammer 40K can draw that amount of loyalty, right, is just it's just fucking cool. It's just fucking cool. And it gives men in a world where these types of things, these types of instincts are demonized. It gives them a place to kind of, even if it is a simulacra, it gives them a place to express these instincts in a even if it is completely fugazi, of space to do it. And I think that that's healthy, and it's kind of beautiful. And one thing that I also find very, very interesting about this in our spaces in the Necromunda, which, the Necromunda is a Warhammer 40K reference, by the way, shows how pervasive it is. So in our space, two factions of guys are always 40K fans and always come together on 40K. And that is traditional Christians being Catholics and some Orthodox, like Catholics and pagans. For some reason, we love this shit. It like speaks to both of us for some reason. Actually, for some reason, you got holy crusades and things look like cathedrals, and the music has like Gregorian chants, and then there's like very Odinic pagan symbolism and war and defeat of evil entities, and like it's just like everything that all of us like put in together. And it's really fascinating how, as Mike said in the beginning, how different people interact with it in different ways and interpret it in different ways. And I don't know. It's just fucking cool. It's cool that it can do that.
Yeah. And actually, I think one of the things I was thinking of is that, to sort of, again, talk a bit about the Grimdark as being amoral or whatever, and how much that like just pisses all the right people off. It's like, with what Dave was saying there about Dune and some of like seriously good sci-fi, that it like actually puts some real arguments in the mouths of the antagonist or whatever. I mean, this is what great literature does. Like, if you think about Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan gets some of the best lines. He's like one of the he actually is like given some like seriously good arguments and everything like that. Like he's kind of a sympathetic character, and like this is very racy for its time, of course, written centuries and centuries ago. But the idea that like even the bad guys, such as they are, get like their voice, and that like they all kind of in Dune or whatever, all these different factions have their own like legitimate like interests, and same in Warhammer 40K. This is something that like progressives hate so much. They hate it so much. This is why they say it's amoral, but it's not amoral. That's how morality works, right? Different people have different oughts. Different people have like things are right for one person that is not right for another. This is just how it works, right? But progressives are the universalist par excellence. For them, there is no morality but universal morality. Like, I was actually reading an academic paper recently called, it was something like, have we become more moral over time, right? And it was basically saying, yes, we have, but but there's like a ways to go and everything like that. And I was like very interested in this, because it's like, well, what is their conception of morality? And it's actually because it's written from a progressive perspective, from a like secular liberal humanist perspective. A lot of what it just considers moral is kind of taken for granted, right? It's just kind of assumed that you will, believe in human rights, and that you'll believe in like, the rule of law and democracy and all of these kind of things or whatever. So it's like not really spelled out till like part way through the paper, when it actually does kind of go into it. And basically the notion of morality, like full stop, for these people it's very impoverished. Basically all it is just treating everybody equally. It's about everybody plays by the same rules. Everyone, nobody is more important than anybody else, except insofar as, they, one person might be more like instrumentally useful in promoting progress and equality. Like a scientist might have more moral consideration than a criminal or whatever, but it's all sort of in the service of this gay universalist ideology and everything like that. This is their conception of morality, right? Only ever in terms of universalism. The idea that different peoples, different clans, different factions, different countries, different races could have things that are good for them, that are good, objectively good for them, but not for everybody, is just it does not compute. It's throw a divide by zero error for these people. It's just not even morality. They just don't see that as morality. So when you get stuff like this, when you get stuff in Grimdark, the main objection to Grimdark from these people is that it's amoral. Is that it's enshrining bad behavior. But really what it's doing is it's just giving all sides kind of a fair shake in terms of that what's good for me is this is what's good, right? And I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is the motivation for progressive, secular, liberal, humanist ideology. Is really what it is it's just slave morality, and slave morality is just really what's good for the nerd, or it's what's good for the weakling, or it's what's good for the guy who got shoved in the locker when he was in high school. And this is it's all a big sublimated, elaborated revenge fantasy against the jock, basically. So even his own universalist morality sort of cashes out to this particularist morality at the end of the day. But I find it very interesting how something like Warhammer 40K that doesn't pretend at all to condescend to this universalist morality that's it's all about harm avoidance and all this shit like that. I just find it very interesting that the reaction that it gets.
Yeah. So, Mr. Mike, in your digging through the lore, did you get a chance to look at the Primarchs and their factions?
I know what the Primarchs are, but I didn't get that far into it, that what each one of them were kind of about or whatever. So yeah, maybe you could fill me in.
Did you find a favorite Primarch?
I don't even really know who they are, to be honest.
Oh man, there's so
I just know what the Primarchs are in the larger scheme of all the lore and everything. I know what function they serve. I just don't know who they are individually.
Yeah. Another thing it's interesting about 40K before we talk about the Primarchs is kind of the reaction to the Chaos Gods, right? Because the Chaos Gods aren't really gods per se. They're not gods as we understand gods. They are sort of like I mentioned before, Lovecraftian beings. They are these entities that exist within the warp and get more powerful with worship and all of these kinds of things. They are not like deities per se. They are kind of like a corruption of a deity. And sort of like the reaction and the interaction with them is pretty fascinating. So, and the kind of the power of their teaching ability is pretty cool too. So very recently, I've been really getting into not video games per se, but paying closer attention to the reactions to video games among folks in our sphere, right? Because there's this convergence happening. A lot of people are awakening to the importance of art and entertainment, and they're really, really getting involved with it. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. But in reaction to this, there are a few people, not a few, but there's a lot of guys that are really shitting on this. They think that, getting involved with making games, getting involved with, trying to do film and printing fiction or whatever, all of the above is just child's play and stupid, and what we're just contributing to what's wrong with modernity and all this kind of stuff, which, fuck those guys. fuck those guys. And I'm not saying that there isn't room for nonfiction. Obviously, I love nonfiction. Mike prints nonfiction. I have all his books. I mean, that's there's plenty of publishers publish nonfiction, and it needs to be there. It needs to be powerful. There needs to be guys out there that are doing philosophy and nonfiction or I don't know what the word is for it. I guess things that are on that side of things, on the academic side of things, I guess you could say. There needs to be everything, all of it. It all needs to be equally powerful. But because I do work in the creative end of things, there is a pushback against the creative end of things that sort of boggles my mind a little bit. And I don't understand why. And one thing that I have found is that when it comes to specifically video games or anything game related, tabletop games, the people that are critics of the creative forces target these the most. They blame video games, they blame cartoons, they blame tabletop games for everything, which is, I think, bizarre, because even many of them came into their ideas through these avenues, right? For example, two different young men, one guy I know in real life and another guy I know online, within 24 hours, both told me they fell in love with history by playing the Total War series, the computer game series, Total War. They fell in love with history playing both that and Mount and Blade. These two video games, now they're history buffs and they're obsessed with history and they buy Imperium books and they, the one guy, actually, we started talking about it because he bought Mike's new Napoleon book. And he wanted to talk to me about it. Unfortunately, I haven't read the new Napoleon book yet. I've got a mountain of books. It's so hard to get through all of it. But I haven't read it yet. But he just wanted to talk about Napoleon. And he's like, yeah, I love Napoleon. And I love the Total War Napoleon game that came out. That's what got me into Napoleon. And I was like, these young guys are coming into understanding history and philosophy and all this kind of shit through games. Why is this not more important to us?
I think there's, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I was just going to briefly say, I think that there's a few reasons why guys basically shit on culture and just want to do politics. It's because there's an idea that culture is downstream of politics, which is kind of true in a way, because certainly we're seeing that right now, that who controls the culture and what gets printed, what gets made into a movie, what gets out there basically is controlled by politics. So, I mean, that's true in a way. And ultimately what we have to do is get into positions of power and cancel all of our enemies. So there's a truth to that. But at the same time, the two things are kind of reciprocal. It's not really that one is upstream of the other. It's more that each influences the other in a way that is one is not really necessarily prior to the other, because as Dave was saying, it's culture influences people to go into politics. We've said so many times about Tolkien and everything, bringing people over to heathenry and to right-wing politics and the idea of honor and justice and things. That is very, very important, right? I think another aspect of it is that people view it as a waste of time, right? This could be, you've got energy that could be put into going out there and getting yourself arrested at a rally in January 6th or something like that. I don't know. They believe that it's childishness or whatever. It's the same objection that people give to sports ball, and we've gone over that. I think that's retarded. And as well, I think there's many things that feed into this, but the other thing that I think does is there's a kind of residual Tipper Gore-ism, if you know what I mean. There's a residual sort of church lady idea from the 1980s that basically anything that is that smacks of transgression or anything that's like a little bit dark or sort of like leading. Like I posted something on the Imperium Telegram a while back now that was just basically like a very like dark looking sort of like picture of like a house or whatever. And I posted something like, we love the darkness, and like a bunch of like trads came at me for that and whatever. It's just like, it's ridiculous. But anyway, I think there's a bunch of things that kind of feed into that.
Yeah. There's a guy on Twitter. I've actually interacted with him a little bit. He's a really smart guy. His name's Lomez. He's kind of boys with Zero HP Lovecraft, he's been on Culture Dads. He's kind of like in that crew. And he made a tweet recently that was just completely, and it wasn't even that he said something completely unique or it wasn't a hot take. It was just something that somebody with his size of his platform needed to say. And he said it with brevity and, it was very poignant and succinct. And he said that conservatives will like always lose, and people that are utilitarians will always lose, and that we must be different. And we must want to be around beautiful things. Beautiful, entertaining things. And it doesn't matter if you could put a $sign on it. If it raises the GDP, we want to be around beautiful, imaginative, fun things. We should just want to have that. Yeah. Because even if it, and I agree with him completely. It's so true that we should just want to have cool things. Dude, nothing beats the rule of cool. Right. And it's like these guys, as I said before, these guys that are like want to shut it down and bring everything to utility. It's like, what's the difference between you and a conservative? It's like a conservative holdover. What's the difference between you and my friend's mom that was just trying to rip his fun out of his soul? You know what I mean? And think about that. I have another friend who, like, he's a great guitar player. Always been a great guitar player. Loves music. Just his whole life is music from day one. All of his jobs, all of his work, all of his everything is just so he can continue playing music. It's like who he is. And early on as a teenager, his mom could not wait to get him to stop doing it. She just wouldn't stop. I remember he goes and I can't remember what he did, but he got some certification so he could get a good job, so he goes good career. First thing out of his mom's mouth is, "Oh, good. Now you can stop playing guitar." Like that has anything to do with it. I was sitting right there and I remember seeing his face. He didn't succumb as my other friend did. I could just remember seeing his face was just full of like, fuck you. Like, how dare you say that to me? But she was of the same thing. She went to a fancy college. She does something in the medical field that's fancy. She's of the upper crust, upper middle class, upper crust, total utilitarian brain. Nothing else matters. It's outside of your career. That is your identity and how much money you make and what kind of car you drive. Nothing else matters. And she didn't understand. And what's ironic about this guy and this lady is this lady's father, it was a pretty accomplished painter, and she was a very, very good painter. Her father actually sent her to art school, and she dropped out to go do some other stuff. So it's like it's so bizarre that she would even like reject that to become this like fucking harpy, this like longhouse harpy. No, you don't do beautiful things. You don't do art. You don't do creative things. You must go wage slave, and that is who you are, right? But going back to Warhammer 40K, the reactions to gaming and the reactions to entertainment and everything like that is like are so wrong for this reason. So if you look into the 40K fan base, you will see young men learn like their reactions to, example, the Chaos Gods. Like they become lessons in morality almost. There is a faction of trannies in 40K that are all fans of the Chaos God Slanesh, right? Slanesh is a fucking tranny, right? Slanesh is literally a tranny. It has a symbol that looks like the male and the female symbol combined, sorta. He's called the Prince of Pleasure, and like the princess or whatever. He's like neither male nor female. He's kind of androgynous, right? And he's evil as fuck, like evil as fuck. And he does gross, weird sex stuff. And he's probably the grossest and the worst. And he's the most hated of the Chaos Gods. And the reaction to that, and the reaction to the fans of Slaanesh, the cult of Slaanesh, are like, they've become so visceral that these guys now just fucking are disgusted by anything that has to do with gender bending and all of that. A guy that's in our spheres that is really good at wielding this is the Golden One. The Golden One will literally call these people out as cult of Slaanesh, right? He will literally call these people out as like, he uses these themes and these archetypes in 40K to like teach existing 40K fans about his philosophies, which is fucking based, right? It's fucking based. So the Chaos Gods, they lay out these things that are and it's kind of fun. Slaanesh is the most hated by far. Next is Tzeentch, and then you have Nurgle, who's sort of liked because he's like, he makes a good point. He's like rot and decay. He goes hard. He's kind of base, but he's still evil. And then probably everybody's favorite is Khorne, who's just like, it's weird that people like Khorne and don't look at him with disgust. He's like the god of slaughter. You know, blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. And like, it's just fucking hilarious. It's just hilarious. I don't know. It's just fascinating to look at this microcosm of culture. They created this little ecosystem of various factions, and so many people like learn like really good lessons of morality from this grim, dark, far future, only war setting. And another thing they do is they look at the Primarchs, and they learn from the Primarchs. And the Primarchs themselves, even the ones that are fallen, are kind of noble in their own way. And for you guys that aren't familiar with what Primarchs are, the sons of the Emperor. They have like his gene seed, and he created them. They're like the Space Marines, and then from their genes comes their factions of Space Marines, right? There's a lot of like, it's weird and sci-fi, but there's a lot of strong themes of lineage in it. You know, because they are the sons of the Emperor, they are the most powerful. And then their sons, even though they're like test tube babies, it's still like treated as this great lineage. Excuse me. But you go into these factions, and they're representative of different real life cultures. You know, they have their own philosophies and their own shit going on, and it's fucking cool. It's just really cool. Some of my favorites, like, I'm not a guy, I don't pick one. I like a lot of them, just because I just think the whole thing is cool. And also, I don't have enough time to go in and really, really become a 40K nut, right? I like Lionel Johnson from the Dark Angels. I like Fulgrim. Fulgrim is a very interesting one. I believe it's Fulgrim. He created, it wasn't Fulgrim. Who did the Word Bearers? Oh, was it Fulgrim? I can't remember. I can't. Who was the guy that I can't fucking remember now. So there was a faction of. There's a faction by this Primarch who started this cult that worshipped the Emperor, right? They literally treated his sayings as scripture, and they created an Emperor cult. And what happened was the Emperor, in his like fatwa to say no worship of anything, even me, goes and punishes and humiliates this Primarch for disobeying his word. Like the most loyal, literally worshiping the Emperor Primarch, fucking punished him and humiliated him. And in this, he fell to chaos. But in chaos, he still worships the Emperor's word. It's really fucking cool. It's really cool.
Definitely, that's very like the strong echoes of Milton's Paradise Lost in that one, right? That's
how's that? Tell me about that.
Well, it's just because, you know, Satan is like the arch kind of the highest of the angels of God's angels, and and in some ways is kind of like following his law the most, but it like leads him into dark paths and to disobey and everything like that. And
Lorgar was his name. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. There's some like deep there's some deep philosophical dimensions to that, because it's, when you say something like "don't worship me" or don't don't even like, you question everything, including what I'm saying, you get like into a liar's paradox situation, right? Where it's like, all Cretans are liars, but it's a Cretan that's saying that, so it's a lie. But if it's a lie, then it's true, because it's so on and so forth. It's like it's a paradox, right? It's sort of like a self-referential thing or whatever. So it's like, do you obey the letter of the law, or do you obey the spirit of the law, kind of thing. That's very interesting, actually, that scenario that you've sketched out there. Is that the Primarch that eventually becomes? Is that Horus? Is that the one that actually commits the heresy?
No, he was. I believe he joins Horus, though.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
that's very interesting. And there's a lot of deep themes that like go into 40K, like just from like even just scratching the surface. I can see how guys, there's a lot to chew on for them, sort of like below the surface, right? And kind of circling back a few minutes to what we're talking about how some people are in our thing are kind of like anti-culture, or like culture's of waste of time, or we'll get to that when we've won, or whatever it is kind of, I don't know. Culture gives people an easy way into deeper waters. You know what I mean? If deeper waters is what you mean by like politics, basically. We talked about this on the folklore episode, where there was a huge response to the folktales book that we put out through Imperium, and probably a big part of that is like it just seemed like it did very, very well in some countries where nationalism is absolutely taboo, right? Because like folklore is inherently nationalist, and the way that we set it up, which was each tale, it had the country of origin, it was organized by which of the Indo-European migrations it came from, and everything like that. It's just like organized in a way that sort of enshrines nationalism in folk culture. And there was a huge response to this, especially in countries where nationalism is frowned upon. So it's probably what this is it finally gives people a kind of kosher way to appreciate these things, or to get into these ideas, right? And I think something like art and entertainment and like Tolkien and Warhammer 40K is a way for people to experience this stuff without just like going out and like throwing up a Roman salute and whatever, you know what I mean? It's like without going into radical politics, you can experience some of it. You can experience some of the issues that are at play, right? And maybe it will lead you somewhere, kind of thing. So it's really short-sighted to shit on culture, when that is really in some ways the entry point to radical politics. And you know what? Radical politics is not an end in itself. Ultimately, culture is kind of the final destination, really. I mean, if all you did was read like the epics, if you just read like Virgil's Aeneid and Homer and the Eddas and Beowulf and all these things, and you really took seriously, and I mean really took that shit seriously, what's in there, all the lessons, everything, the heroism, if you modeled your life after what's in there, if enough people did that, if a small number of people seriously did that and made that like their religion, then the world would be set to rights within a generation. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That is the deep end of philosophy, right? It's really what's in those books is kind of the end and culmination of radical politics. That's what you're going for. That's the goal. That's where you're supposed to get to. So to denigrate culture and say, well, it's a secondary thing or anything like that is like, it is the way in, and it is also the destination. So it's stupid. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even say, I'll be honest, Mike, I'm like sort of allergic to the word radical anymore. Because I just I don't know. I just don't think, we said this before. I just don't think that I'm radical. I don't think I'm radical. I don't think I'm extreme. I'm just like regular. You know what I mean?
Well, we're like, it's hard to say, because from a structural perspective, like, we're radical compared to what's, the center of today. But the center of today is radical in comparison to the deep center of like all of human history. We really are the deep center. We're the ones that, like, we are fucking normal, right? We're the ones that represent normality if you just zoom out a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I take your point. I mean, ultimately what we are is we are the deep center, but it looks radical from a, gnat's eye view today, right? Because where we're at is like, when you're at the North Pole, everything looks like the deep south, you know what I mean? And that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I get it. So it's, I agree. The reaction to culture is like, I just don't get it. I just don't understand why you have to be like really, and I think that it's changing, and the people that are like that are kind of getting bullied to like shut up about it, and it will change, especially as, man, some of the quality of stuff that's coming out of our spheres is just improving every day. I'm seeing such cool stuff, and it's like, as you said this very early on, like right when I think one of our first culture, or maybe even before that, you said that we have to create like a place that we could live in, a place that we could inhabit. And it's getting to the point that we sort of outgrew like the meme phase of everything, and now things are just like starting to just look fun and cool, and we're creating things that people could just enjoy. We're just, as Mr. Lomez said, just being around beauty. And when I say beauty, I mean that loosely, not beauty as necessarily a symmetrical, not like a beautiful woman per se. I mean beauty as in beauty, like the greater, like things that are just like have aesthetic value, and things that are just unspokenly valuable. And I'm just very proud of it. I think it's going to blossom into something really, really cool. And I think we're going to leave a lot of the other stuff behind. I think there's going to be a lot of that gets left behind, and we're really just going to become a cultural movement, like how we're supposed to. From day one, this was called a culture war. And like, how you going to fight in a culture war if you're not fighting with culture? It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. And we're covering all the bases, and we're going really, really far into it. And like, that's not even the goal. So I got a book recently. I'm fucking digging into it, and I'm really enjoying it. I got this book. It's called Decline of the West. It's like the philosophy and politics of H.P. Lovecraft. It's by the H.P. Lovecraft scholar S.T. Joshi. And one thing S.T. Joshi says in the book is, he says that pretty much every weird fiction author, every person that does that creates settings and stuff, is unconsciously trying to convince you of their worldview. But what's important about it is that they have to think that they're not. And I was like, that really got the gears turning, because I've said this many times, is that don't try to be a right-wing artist or this artist or even left. Don't be any sort of, don't go out with just being this type of artist. Go out with the goal of being a good artist. And what you think and what you believe and everything will just organically manifest. You just really have to unhitch, detach those things, those ideas that I have to create this, because what you create will be what you want it to be, and people will like it more, right? And I think this is very, very apparent in Warhammer 40K. Because when people really identify with say like Primarch legions or whatever, some people identify with factions just because they think it's cool. For example, I love the Tyranids. The Tyranids are like one of my favorites. There's nothing philosophically to like identify with. They're literally just an entire like species of creatures that are like John Carpenter's The Thing. They steal genes and create like different forms, and they like subsume all of like a planet's species to their genetic makeup, and the only way to defeat them is to just drop exterminatus, which is like a world nuke on the planet and just completely blow the planet up. That's like the only way to stop them. You can't stop them. And what's really okay, so I'm gonna talk about fucking Tyranids because I like these guys so much. So the way that they take over a planet, this is fucking just brilliant. I love this. Is they drop these like shapeshifters there, and they will take the genes of people and begin to breed with them. And at first, the people, the children of the Tyranids are unrecognized, are like indiscernible from regular people. You can't even tell. But as generations go by, they begin to look weirder and weirder and weirder. And by the time you start noticing that these people like are starting to look weird, they've already like spread their genes throughout like so much of civilization, and they have now begun to alert like the flotilla mothership, and it's inbound, right? And what happens is as they get closer, because of they have like this great hive mind, like this like fucking mother brain type thing aboard these crafts. And because of the power of the mother brain, it like scrambles any sort of communication. So you're like, the planet's like shooting out communication, like, hey, Mayday, some shit's going down. Like motherfuckers are dropping ships. There's a fucking Tyranid mothership. By the time the Tyranid mothership shows up, it's already too late and you're fucking doomed and nobody will come to save you. And so it's like fucking based. So you start seeing these Tyranid drop ships start coming down. You're like, all right, fight to the death. That's the only option. It's fucking cool. I don't know what my point was. I just wanted to talk about that.
That's fucking based. Yeah, that's the thing, is that like, you know, it hits us on a preconscious level, right? These things. It's like, you know, there's the whole thing about Culture Dads is that, you know, when we started this, it's not a political podcast, right? We talk about, there's political dimensions to it. We often tie it into our folkish worldview, everything like that. But sometimes it's just fucking cool. You know what I mean? Sometimes cool shit is just
cool,
awesome.
bro.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, let me see. So you didn't get a chance to watch Hell's Reach?
No, unfortunately I didn't.
That is so dope. So the story of that is there's this one guy who leads this like little faction called, I believe they're the Black Crusaders or something like that. And his name is Reclusiarch Grimaldus. And he gets sent to go fight the Orks on this planet. I believe the planet is called Hell's Reach. And he knows that this is his final destination. You know, he even says, he's like, I will go to this planet and this is where I will die. And it's just like, it's so fucking epic. And he goes there and they fight the Orks and they just fucking die there. And it's such a fucking like, it's so dope. It's so dope. The Orks in 40K are their own thing. They're actually not even really like a species. They're a fungus. They're a fungus. They like spread spores, and from the spores sprout these like I don't even know, like these wombs, these cocoons that just sprout these orcs like mad. And they have all of this technology that doesn't actually function. It works by their collective belief. So they will get into this hunk of junk, just like a pile of junk, and all of the orcs in it believe that it is like a tank or something, and it starts to operate as a tank. It's crazy. And the more that they get riled up and into it and all of this kind of stuff, the more they turn into like a horde. And this is called a warg. And they like will gather together on this gigantic, like hundreds of thousands of them, millions of them will gather together on this gigantic ship that doesn't even work. It's not even really a ship, but they all collectively believe that it's a ship, and they're gonna go fucking fight in this war and go conquer, because that's what they're just completely just about war and killing, and it's fun to them. It's who they are. So out of their collective belief, this ship gets more and more powerful, and as they get more fanatical and more crazed, it goes faster and faster and gets bigger and more powerful, and the war will, as it travels, becomes like this snowball effect, and by the time it lands, it's just fucking mayhem. It's crazy. It's so fucking fun. It's a great setting. It's a great setting, and it communicates so many awesome things, and it's so creative, and it combines so many wonderful aspects of different settings that people love, like Dune and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Conan and Lovecraft, and just everything you can think of is in it. And as Mike said, it doesn't matter what you're doing with it, dude. The books aren't just. It's not just like books to help sell miniatures. This is legit, really, really good storytelling. And you go and you look at how Games Workshop, they're, first of all, they're like greedy as fuck. And they completely just like will sue the shit out of anybody that uses their stuff. You have to really walk on eggshells around their stuff. They guard their IP like fucking bulls. So like thousands of people submit 40K books to them to be part of what they call the Black Library every year, and they reject like almost all of them. They procure only the very best of literature for their Black Library. It's pretty cool. It's like a total. It's kind of shitty and evil and like greedy in some ways, but it's also like how they've managed to preserve their the integrity of their setting and their game and everything for decades now. And only now are they starting to get a little bit paused. And also part of this is because the fan base are like loyal to the fucking emperor. You know what I mean? So they have fought and argued and bullied anybody that brought in anything that could ruin their thing. They protected it. And I think, I guess it's a simulacra, and people could say that it's nerdy or whatever. It's like, fuck it, whatever. But it's also fucking cool. And you can look around just our sphere and look at guys like the Golden One and so many others that have like gained inspiration from 40K to go and become fucking like to go to the gym and become gym bros and pursue martial arts and get into ancient religion and philosophy. 40K has like propelled so many people into going on to do greater things. So to think that it's just this nerdy setting or whatever is underselling it grossly, in my opinion.
Actually, that was something I wanted to bring up in terms of the ability of the canon to preserve itself. There's something, now I don't know because this is basically my first sort of foray into it, so I could be wrong, but it's, from what I understand, the canon doesn't quite work the same way as it like other universes or whatever, so that video that I watched, the primer, that like hour-and-a-half primer that just scratched the surface of the lore, one of the things that it explains at the very beginning is the origin of the emperor. And the guy who's explaining it, he actually goes through 3 different origin stories for the emperor, which is interesting. And he's like, well, here's one of them, and here are some reasons to believe it and some reasons not to. Here's the second and third one, and I believe this one, but et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's really weird. How does that work with a canon? Well, I did a little bit of digging, and apparently Games Workshop say that like everything ever written about its lore is like equally true or canon. Now, obviously, they sell their own books, and these are like the Black Library, so to speak, and all that is like, that is their official thing, and that they guard as their intellectual property. But from what I understand, everything is canon. You know what I mean? And this is kind of reminiscent of real history in that nothing is totally reliable. Everything requires some interpretation. Some things contradict others. And this kind of sounds like they would be kind of giving up the canon itself. But this is actually kind of how folk culture preserves itself in some ways. And what's very interesting is that people will get really, they'll get very upset when you don't tell the story quite right, or when you deviate from the lore, or in a way that like they find unacceptable, even if like some people believe this and other people believe that. It's actually goes back to, again, there's many parallels with folklore, actually. Maybe I'm just thinking about it because that's the last episode we did. But there's a law in folklore called Anderson's Law of Autocorrection. And the idea is that now you would think that the way that like folk tales sort of like run off the rails and become like you run away from like the original kind of germ of the story very quickly, because it's like a game of telephone, things get distorted and et cetera, et cetera. But the way that it actually works is that folklore is extremely conservative. And one of the reasons why is because there's audience-driven censorship. Basically, people get really upset if you can change certain details about the story, but if you change some details, like Little Red Riding Hood, I mean, she could be Little Blue Riding Hood, but if she eats the wolf, or if there's some certain things in the story that are just not told, people get really upset about that. They're like, fuck that. This guy doesn't tell the story very well. Let's listen to this guy. And there's just sort of a natural, spontaneous way of preserving the story that kind of arises. And I wonder if this is sort of like how it works with the fan fiction with Warhammer 40K. I don't really know. I'm just sort of raising it as an open question. Like, I could see perhaps a massive battle sort of on the horizon with now that Warhammer is starting to bend the knee a little bit and sort of submit to the pause. Might there be a battle over the in-game universe? Will this kind of like law of autocorrection of audience-driven censorship, might that come into play? It would be it'll be interesting to see, and it might make an interesting folkloristic study to like study the way that the canon preserves itself in Warhammer 40K. But does this ring true for what you understand, Dave? That like everything is canon or whatever? Because I've seen this in a couple of different places about 40K.
So I don't think that they consider like fan fiction to be canon necessarily. The only like stuff that's officially out of Games Workshop, out of the Black Library, is considered canon. But there is this vibe of so it's as you mentioned before, it's very much like real history. The way that they put it, when there's contradictions, it's because it was recorded by somebody else. You know what I mean? And this this really lends to it being a living world. It gives it this living feel that because that's how real history is. Like like we grow up learning that freaking Caligula was this like evil guy or whatever, or Nero is this evil guy, and I guess they could have been, but you look at, there's people that record it and talk about it in a different way, that they weren't evil guys, they just bullied the guys that wrote history, right? That a lot of what's written down about them is like just people that were like butt mad about getting dicked over. And they just
and sometimes it's their enemies that write the history. Like Genghis Khan is a good example of that. There's many people in history that have kind of suffered at the hands of historians, because it's not great men that write history; it's nerds, right? It's the literati.
Yeah, so like Julius Caesar, like they say that he was a homo and like had a relationship with his nephew and stuff like that. Now it's like guys are saying no, that's not the case. He wasn't a homo. He was not that. So the Alexander the Great, you know what I mean? Alexander the Great. Not only are they making it, they talked about him like a homo back then, but this movie that came out, was it who did that? Was it Oliver Stone? The Alexander movie made him out to be like he's just a completely like sex crazed homo, right? That was probably not the case, right? There's a lot of people. I just watched a video. Some dude made the case that there's absolutely zero evidence that he even did any of that. That was just completely made up. So it's like even today, people are writing things that not just lies, but sometimes people write things that are differently. You know what I mean? One of the worst types of evidence for example, for in like a murder case or whatever, is eyewitness accounts. Empirical evidence is not always very good. Eyewitness accounts could be completely different because human beings interpret things differently, right? You have priors and presuppositions, and you are kind of at the mercy of your feelings at the time, and whether or not you're under stress, blah blah blah. Dude, I have conversations with people, and like maybe I'll be in a bad mood or whatever, and I like sometimes somebody will say something to me, and I like take it as like, this guy said something, jerk off, and then later on my wife or one of my friends be like, no, he didn't say it like that. So it's like this is something that happens throughout all of history with everything. So the fact that Warhammer 40K has that in it, you would assume that kind of would screw with the canon, but it has done the opposite effect in that it breathes more life into it. So I think that it's that's definitely in there.
And I wonder if that aspect of it, that they're not afraid to embrace contradiction, might actually make it easier for it to preserve the original sort of storyline. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, yes, there's some like, disgusting stuff that comes in, or there's some like bullshit that like makes its way in, but people don't really take that seriously because there's all this other stuff. And, it's kind of like each fan has to interpret for himself kind of thing. I wonder, I have a feeling like that's going to help actually make it more robust. But that's just a conjecture or whatever. I just thought that was interesting I've never heard of something like this, like a canon kind of working that way before. And I thought that was quite a unique feature of it actually.
And they're going to have a really hard, it's now, they're going to pause it. They're going to at least try, but it's going to be really fucking hard because just like the foundational principles and the motivations behind this world and the stuff that's already in there, they're going to have a tough time saying things like, oh, well, actually being a is good. And then you got all these books about how Slaanesh is fucking evil. You know what I mean? Like he does all this like evil shit. He's a bad guy. How are we gonna have dude? What are they fucking of Slaanesh? So it's gonna be tough for them to really reverse it. They're going to, and they're going to try, but it's just gonna turn it into just fucking garbage. It's gonna be clown show, right? So it's gonna make everything. It's gonna be like with a lot of other IPs where the people that really, really love it and like it are going to stop buying the shit. It's going to bleed the company and they're going to hurt financially. And they're going to say, okay, here's the point in time where everything before is legit and canon. Everything after this is trash. This is now in a fucking, they're going to nail shut the sarcophagus and say, this is what it is. This is what happened. This is what has happened with all like everything. I brought up Star Wars multiple times, but Star Wars is a good example of this because real Star Wars guys that like read the expanded universe, and they're really, really into Star Wars. There's a distinction between what they call canon and what they call, what do they call it? Disney something. So anything prior to Disney buying it, they considered to be either major or minor canon, and then anything after Disney bought it is like, might as well be fan fiction.
Yeah, exactly. And like ultimately, it's the audience that will make that distinction and make that decision, right? Because Warhammer seems to have tapped into something that people need, that people want, that they weren't really getting in many other places. I mean, you could see it in Conan, you could see it in like other aspects of, popular culture or, alternative media and things like that. But man, I had no idea what a huge phenomenon it was. Obviously, I've heard the term Warhammer 40K. I had no idea that it had such deep lore and like it was so massively popular. But it's popular because it's giving people something that they needed, right? I think what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I think what it is fundamentally, I think it's a spontaneous expression of the West's longing for fascism. Sorry, Like, if I'm just going to be blunt about it, the West wants that. It's what we don't have. One of the imperatives at the heart of our culture is loving the other, loving what it is that is distant, and this is kind of gay in some ways. But what we have, what's distant, fundamentally, is that. You know what I mean? I mean, sure, it's like it's vilified as Warhammer 40K is. But it's also kind of based, and people want to live in that world, right? Like, as evidenced by how many people spend so much time in the quasi-fascist culture of Warhammer 40K. You know what I mean?
My boy Tristan said something one time. He goes, not all fans of 40K are fascists, but all fascists are fans of 40K.
Yeah, I could see that, yeah. And I think it's funny. It's funny that like the company. I mean, obviously they've tried to resist up until recently, but in that time of like trying to resist the zeitgeist of the culture, they're just like, you look at what's going on in the lore and everything, and it's like it's pretty transparently authoritarian. State cult and everything. Like, come on, guys, like be real. But they're like, look, it's not an endorsement. We're just being realistic or whatever. And there's no good guys. We're not saying that the Imperium is good any better than all this other stuff. And it's like, really though? I don't know. It sounds like the lady doth protest too much.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you were really feeling that, would you build a whole universe around it? It's kind of like the mirror image of like trads who spend all their time hating gays and like thinking about gays and like discussing gays, and it's like occupies their mental energy for like most of their waking hours. You know what I mean? It's also kind of like the mirror image of like tankies who claim to hate fascism or whatever. You know what I mean? Or activist academics who like obsessively study right-wing regimes. If you didn't like it, you wouldn't be thinking about it all the time. You know what I mean? So I think that like whether consciously or not, I think the creators of Warhammer were kind of like, yeah, this is cool. We like this. We like the authoritarian, like, Imperium regime and everything. Like, and the fan base too, right? It's like nobody spends a huge amount of their time involved in a quote unquote fascist world without being attracted to it. Right. And even like the fan base aspect of Warhammer that is not, doesn't want anything to do with politics and certainly nothing to do with right-wing politics. I think that just like the Warhammer fan base is just a little less in denial about that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, in a way, it's like not unlike the Icelanders or the Norse, the medieval Icelanders recording their heathen lore. They're like, we're Christian. It's a heresy. But, it's like, come on, guy, you love it. You're recording it faithfully. You're singing the old lays. You learn the old meters. You believe in trolls. You believe in giants. And you're like, sure, it's a heresy, guy. Like, come on, you love this, right? So yeah. I think that it is an expression of the West's longing for something that it has lost, that it is abandoned, but that it needs. And that's a beautiful thing, and that's why it irritates people who have a disgusting worldview. So, all the power to them. I hope it continues strong as it can going into the future.
So I know we're at 2 hours, but I wanted to kind of pick your brain on something real quick. So, and this has to do with what we just talked about with Warhammer 40K. What is fascism? So let me preface this. I know what fascism is. I have read Giovanni Gentile. I know about Italian fascism. I know about the Phalangism, Francisco Franco. I know, I know about Dolphus. I know about, Mustache Man. I know about all these people. I know about their ideologies and everything like that. So I was recently asked, like, by somebody that's kind of like starting to understand different ideas. They go, "Are you a fascist?" Like, asking me straight up, and I was like, I don't know. I don't think so, because it's not because I'm like scared of that term or anything like that, but I very much view fascism as a socioeconomic political system that was designed for the time that it existed. You know what I mean? I don't view the word authoritarian and fascism as synonymous. You know, I view them as, obviously they're different things. There's some aspects of fascism that I think are no longer compatible with the material conditions of current year. So it's like hard for me to say that people today can be fascist. Am I wrong with that, or what do you tell me? What is fascism? Tell me.
Okay, so obviously this is the case with anything, but different people mean different things by the same term. And it's a bit complicated because there is fascism proper, which is Italian fascism, and then there's the broader term. But what I think is interesting and worth talking about is the broader term, of which the Italian branch is one instance. Basically, so I mean, when you hear like liberals, or well, not so much liberals, although some of them, like idiots like Dinesh D'Souza and all this, but mostly the left, they'll say that something is fascist. They'll be like, you know, the U.S. government is fascist, or even like guys on our side, they'll be like the deep state is fascist or whatever. FDR was a fascist, and this is like kind of accepting the enemy's frame. What fascism is fundamentally is it's about social ontology, right? When Mussolini says that the state is above all, nothing outside of the state, nothing against the state, that is an expression of fascism's social ontology, right? For Hitler, the Volk is above all. For Primo de Rivera of the Phalange, the nation, the nation is above all. For a fascist, the whole precedes the part, right? And you would think that this is the case for communists too. After all, doesn't communism just mean the community but first? Well, no, it doesn't, because for communism, it's actually class that's above all. It's a kind of group, but it's not the whole, right? It's still a class, like the working class or the upper class or the bourgeois or the capitalists. That class is still just a part of the whole. It might be a larger part than the individual. Like for liberals like Locke, the individual comes first. For Marx, class comes first. For these, like liberalism and its daughters, like communism and socialism.
So what about Stalin?
Stalin is ideologically he is a Marxist. In practice, though, he behaves kind of like a fascist, right? There was like an interesting book called The Faces of Janus that was written about this by actually a scholar of fascism, A. James Gregor, where he basically makes the argument that like fascism, Italian fascism and Stalinism were not that far apart, actually. So for the fascist, the whole comes before the part. For these other, like, you know, Enlightenment ideologies, the part comes before the whole. The confusion it comes around because liberalism is still kind of totalitarian, right? Like the deep state is totalitarian, as in it can't brook any opposition. It can't tolerate anything against itself. But it's not fascist because the deep state still doesn't give a fuck about, like, you know, the people. It doesn't give a fuck about basically anything except for itself. Whereas the proper fascist ideology is that the whole of society, or the state, which is like, you know, in Italian fascism is the culmination of society, is like, that is what really matters, and that is what's ontologically prior to all this other stuff. So, I mean, totalitarianism and fascism are two separate things. Fascism is a kind of totalitarianism, but you can also have totalitarianism with liberalism, and that's why it gets a little bit complicated. But at the bottom, at the end of the day, I think that's really what fascism is about. It's really about this corporativism. It's about the whole coming before the part, and you can actually see this in Warhammer as well. Like there's a definite like corporativist aspect of it.
What does
right?
that word mean?
So corporativism is really, it's just the polite word for fascism. It's what you can say in academic speech without getting canceled, or sort of, because they know what it means. Corporativism, the root of corporativism is corpus, meaning the body, and it's like an analogy where, like, the idea of the fascism is the fasces, right? Where you've got the bundle of sticks that's stronger together than the individual sticks, and the corpus, the body, is a whole, right? You cannot have the body when you've got the leg over here and the torso there and the head over there and the arms and legs and everything's all, separate. It's dead, right? When you divide up the body, it dies. But when it's together, when it's all working in harmony, that is when it's like a real thing and it's alive. And the analogy of the corpus of the body is that each part of society is like an organ of the whole, right? So it's like the working class has its part to play, the bourgeois has its part to play, the government has its part, and so on and so forth. The nobility, the religion, and the priesthood, they all are like, none of them is the point. The point is the thing all taken together, and they are all just organs without which, and without the other organs, they can't really, they can't function, right? Like, none of them, they would all die without each of them as a whole, kind of thing. And I mean, in some ways, you can see this a little bit in 40K, right? Where it's, the citizenry is kind of like used to do whatever is needed for the good of the state, right? The emperor is, might sacrifice, what was it, those thunder something or other,
Thunder Warriors,
yeah. They, like, once their use is kind of spent, like, he'll sacrifice them. You know what I mean? He's not a nice guy, but he's doing what is right for the totality, right? It's like a theocratic ethno-state fucking like authoritarian. It's like authoritarianism, right? It's like the Imperium impresses its people into its worldview. Everything is intended to basically serve the state, or the whole, the empire as a whole. That is the whole point and everything. So anyway,
so
that's
all societies will eventually be fascist.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, fascism is just like how societies work if they don't want to die. You know what I mean? In its broadest form. Now, I mean, if you want to say, like, okay, Italian fascism, it works this particular way, the main difference between Italian fascism and, like, German fascism, say, is that the Italian fascism says the state is the ontologically prior thing, but the German fascism says it's the folk that is the ontologically prior thing. That is a little bit different, right? Because the state can, well, as we can see, I mean, in the West, the state has nothing to do with the folk today, right? So those are two things. Ideally, they would come into conjunction. Ideally, they would be like, one would, like, they would basically be like, if you had a Venn diagram of two circles, there would basically be one circle, right? But that's not the way it always works in practice. It's just to say that they can be two different things. So there's a little bit of an ideological difference between those two branches of fascism, and it's different for yet other branches, and so on and so forth. But the basic sort of, like, overarching principle is that the whole comes first, right? And, like, I mean, realistically, that's what every society that has ever lasted for more than 5 minutes has done. So this is kind of why
you wrote an article about this.
Yeah, well, maybe it's not well understood, actually, because a lot of people think, like, fascism just means, like, putting your boot on a guy's neck, or, like, all these meme understandings of fascism, or, like, fascism just means, like, putting on a uniform and marching in lockstep, or, like, everything's in black and white photographs or whatever. Like, there's kind of shitty meme understandings of fascism, and it's too bad, because really what it is at the end of the day, it's just what a healthy society looks like.
No, I said you did just write an article, like, adjacent to this, about how liberalism eventually must become, like, authoritarian.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's what we're seeing, right? We are seeing it that's the culmination, right? Like now, basically, what's happening is that liberalism is being forced to take the mask off, and the only way that it can sort of like maintain its mythology is, the only way that it sort of like can operate in the way that it wants to is by maintaining the mythology of, freedom and tolerance and rule of law and all this shit. But at the end of the day, that stuff, it will throw that aside with the national security exception and just be like, fuck the rule of law. We're going to do what we need to do to make the society not fall over. And what it's doing there fundamentally is it's basically becoming fascist, as long as it needs to in order to right the ship, basically. So that's a very uncomfortable thing to have to face if you are an ideologically committed, progressive, secular, humanist liberal, is that your society is really no different than the ones that you fought against throughout all of the 20th century. That's a very uncomfortable realization, and they will put that off and they will ignore that and they'll stick their head in the sand as long as they can. Unfortunately, they're being made to face that, especially in the last like 2 or 3 years. And it's like making them fucking hysterical. And all this stuff that we talk about on Culture Dads, all the beautiful things that are really based and everything, they don't like that either, because that makes them have to face up to it as well.
Yeah. And you're talking about autocorrection with Warhammer 40K, and sort of the reason that despite like kind of the company, if the company didn't have these like fans that would just like spurg out if they paused, they would have paused a long time ago, right? So there's like this like series. It's not necessarily bottom up, but it's like the hands and the legs and the feet of the operation will like drive the head into the ground if it doesn't maintain the blood flow, right? And something that I'm kind of struggling with all of this is, firstly, like, I love history, and everybody knows, I guess, I guess I'm having an identity crisis these days with things, and I'm starting to just say, I don't know, just let me, write, and let me, I have like these positions that I understand to be good and true, and just let me write and do things, because I don't know what the right answer is anymore. Because I want to throw this at you. I want to hear what you have to. This is kind of off the rails a little bit. Going back to the autocorrection, the fan base of 40K, correcting and gatekeeping and protecting the IP. It may be possible that we cannot see, with the way that things are evolving and the way the world has gone, it's very possible that we have crossed a precipice that we can't truly have nationalism anymore. And I'm not saying this like, oh, it's all globalism, all open borders, everything. But I mean, the idea of a singular particularist state overseeing these already balkanized, especially in America. Maybe it's a different situation in, say, Germany or Italy or whatever. But in the United States, it's going to be it's nigh impossible for there to be a state that becomes, corporativist, right? Because there are so many different people, right? It's just like, even if you take away the immigration, just the differences in culture among like heritage Americans is something that is going to be nigh impossible to bring together in an entire body. And I think that this is something with, whether we like it or not, global communication, global trade, global fucking everything, whether it's good or not, that's something we have to deal with now going forward. So it's going to be pretty tough for, I think, anywhere to have a state like Mussolini had, or like Stalin had, or like anybody, or Rome had, or anybody had. It's going to be tough to have that. So what is the option? And also, there's a lot of, I'm a critical guy. Even though I'm sympathetic to things that are authoritarian, some of these authoritarian, regimes and everything did some pretty weird shit. Did some shit that like I think about as a human, as like me, as a guy, as a dad, as as Dave, and I'm like, dude, I would have fucking opposed that shit. Like, let's look at the Reich. They did that. Was that the Lebensspring or whatever, where they were birthing babies and all that? Dude, if the state, whether it's if they came and tried to take my daughter and say that she's a broodmare and she's gonna get trains ran on her by soldiers and like have babies and shit, I would pull my guns out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they came, my oldest son is autistic. If they said, oh, well, he needs to be euthanized, dog, my guns are coming out. You know what I mean? I don't know how much of all, let's be real here. That stuff happened. They did that stuff. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that they were all bad or all evil or whatever, but they did some pretty weird shit that, nobody here listening is going to be cool with. Like, if you're listening now, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just, I agree with that. Like, there's a kind of overcorrection that happens where the regime that is the most opposite to liberalism, I mean, liberalism is almost pure evil. There's very little in it that's redeemable. So whatever is the most opposed to that must be the most good, right? That's the kind of thinking that we get. So obviously, it's German fascism is, to use a euphemism, that is the thing that is,
because that's their Satan.
That's their Satan. So that is like, for people who are critical of liberalism, sometimes the reaction is to say that Satan must actually be all light and good and like nothing wrong with it or whatever. There are some problems. There are definitely some issues with it, and without going into like big critiques or whatever, I mean, there are lots of examples you could give. There was a program that they had to basically with like one of their youth programs that would encourage children to snitch on their parents if they didn't believe the right things or subscribe to the state ideology and everything. And of course, somebody like me, as much as I'm for like the folk and the state and the nationalism and everything like that, above and beyond that, I am for the sovereignty of the father. So I wouldn't have any of that. I would oppose that. I don't think that's good at all. In fact, I think that's very destructive. And it may be that they only did that like as a sort of, something that was like they had to do it as a practical measure or whatever it is. But, that's wrong. It's just objectively wrong. So,
you just don't snitch on your dad ever.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, I mean, like, again, I'm not going to go into like, deep critiques or anything like that, because obviously these various regimes, mid-century regimes in Europe, they got some things right too, right? I'm not here to gainsay any of that, but it's not perfect. Certainly, it's not. I can definitely understand that. I mean, authoritarianism itself is kind of not enough, right? It needs to be legitimate authority, and that legitimate authority needs to ultimately come from the father. And the father is the paradigm of legitimate authority. This is what the whole Robert Filmer book is about, which is, I think, it's something that guys need to look at. But
so if the father is like, so if the father is the highest, right? Then how is the state above him?
Well, the state's not above him. That's the thing, is that, and of course, the way that it worked anciently through, in the Germanic branch of the Indo-Europeans, the Roman, and many other branches, is that the father himself was subordinate to any, like, basically his clan, right? And his clan was the eldest brother, like basically the eldest brother sort of was like the eldest brother of his whole branch, and everything was kind of like the father figure to all of the fathers. And that would be the clan chieftain. And among the clan chieftains, you have the same relationship to like the tribal chieftain, and so on and so forth. This is how you get this like nested concentric circle that like grows up into the state cult. And then the king is like the father of the father, all the way down to the house father and everything like that. That is the proper orientation of the state and everything. That is really fascism. This is where fascism comes from thousands, like 6,000 years ago. That's the germ of fascism that sort of like, grows up into all of that.
But would you say that to lose that and to make it purely secular, which is what fascism is, would be like sort of liberal?
Yeah, it's going to lead you into error, right? It can never be fully secular because fundamentally the father isn't actually sovereign over the family. The father is really, I mean, we say that because he's sort of like the earthly power in the family. But really, the father is subordinate to the ancestors, isn't he? They're really sovereign. Like, he can't sell his property. He has no right to do that because it's not his property. It's actually their property, right? So if you don't have this idea of the ancestors as divine, as present, as like metaphysically there with you on the property, present at all times, the thing kind of doesn't work. I mean, it can kind of be secularized into like a folkishness and nationalism, and it can, instead of like a literal worship of gods that are present and there right now with you, you can make it a kind of veneration of your ancestors. You can make it a respect for your ancestors, and you just like, you don't sell the property, or you don't like, sell out the state like goods to hostile actors out of respect. But respect isn't really enough. It needs to be a religious orientation. That's the thing that's going to maintain it, right? So fascism as a secularization of that is not enough. It's better than what we have, but it's not. You're not going all the way, right? So what I would say to answer the other question that you asked before that, which is like, what's the way forward when you're just not going to get a Mussolini or anything like that? I think the way forward is organically presenting itself to us these days, which is basically balkanization, right? Isn't it? That's what's happening even within cities, right? Like the no-go zones in like, these cities in Sweden and cities in the UK and everything like that. The like certain places within these cities and these countries that are under de facto Sharia law, like that's not good. I don't like that, but that is the future, right? The future is clannishness. The future is detaching yourself from the state and like living a somewhat of an autonomous life to the extent that you can, which is, I think, going to happen as the state is like, I mean, it looks very strong right now, but it's getting harder and harder for it to keep all of these like, all of these balls up in the air that it's juggling. It's going to be very hard for the state to, like, it's already happening in the United States where like there are certain states that have, I read about this like several months ago where there was like one state that like just basically sort of like straight up disobeyed the federal government. You're going to see more and more of that. That's going to keep happening. It's going to get worse for them. And especially as the economy gets worse and the government is like just unable to like meet its debt obligations and everything, like it's going to have bigger fish to fry than like worrying about like some fucking clan out in like rural Maine or something like that. You know what I mean? So I think the future is really that. It's detaching from the state and becoming a state within a state, becoming your own little sort of thing that is like self-governing and like it answers to itself and gives itself law and everything like that. We're not telling people to disobey the government or anything like that. But what we are saying is that the practical reality is that the government is going to be less interested in what you're doing kind of going forward, especially if you live in a rural area and things like that. So I think that the days of continent spanning empire like Russia style or America style governments of like over these massive areas, that is going to come to an end. You're going to actually start to see something that looks a little bit more like the early Middle Ages, or like with all these duchies and like Liechtenstein style places, you know, where they're kind of under a much more local form of governance, right? It'll probably get worse. It'll probably get more totalitarian before that happens. But when that starts to happen, it'll just be like, oh, look, you know, we're kind of like only answering to our state government these days more than the federal government. And then very quickly that will cascade into like, holy shit, we're kind of on our own. So now is the time to build. Now is the time to like you build your clan and actually fucking do that. And if you do, then your kin, your children, your family will be in a much better position than other people's will. So yeah, that's my long-term prediction.
So it's just like, I don't know. I've just been like exploring in my mind, reading more, and like our talks here on Culture Dads, and honestly reading Imperium books, and your Substack and everything has just like completely fucking, like flipped me on my head with a lot of things. So I don't know.
That's good.
I have come, and you know what? It was like when I became a libertarian, I became a libertarian not because I really, really was a libertarian, was because that was like the best option, right?
Yeah.
That was like what I thought was out there. And then I go into more other types, I guess paleo-conservatism, you could call it, right? And then I go into more third position things, and then I go into this and I go into that, and I'm like all over, just kind of like trying to figure it out. And I kind of just come back to, heathenry is right, folkism is right, patriarchy is right. Like we did it was like our first episode, The Godfather. The Godfather is right. Yeah, I mean, like that's what's right. But the problem that I'm coming into is that if the Godfather is right, that means that he is more right than the state. And if I view that the Godfather is more right than the state, then I am not a statist. I'm a fatherist or something. I don't know.
Or it means that the state, the scope and application of the state is just smaller. Like the state just is the family, or the state just is the clan, or whatever, And this has changed over time. It changed in the ancient world too. This is not just a modern thing where, like, look at the Roman Empire. Like Rome began as just this little confederation of like families and clans and tribes and things like that. And then it grew and grew and grew until it became this like multiple continent spanning empire. And then very quickly it became something a lot smaller. So what counts as the state? Like people kind of think of the state as this thing that's like very official and needs to have a constitution, and it's written down somewhere. Like it's this thing that's very official, but actually the state is something that's changing all the time, right? And actually this is where what the term Imperium comes from. Speaking of Imperium in Warhammer 40K, like I had a guy come at me kind of recently. I don't know where I was discussing it. I was discussing it in like some heathen thing. And I had some guy to basically come at me and say, because I was just basically saying like, look, particularism is the way to go. And like, this is right for us and everything. He's like a universalist coming at me. And he's like, how could you call yourself Imperium Press if you don't believe in real Imperium, right? Well, what does Imperium mean? This is a good question. Like Imperium is typically translated as empire, but actually the term Imperium is etymologically related to imperative, right? It's what is your Imperium? I think a better translation of it is dominion, right? And your dominion could be larger or smaller depending on like what power you have, right? What your Imperium is, what your empire is just what you have command over. It's just what you have control over, right? It's what you issue commands and imperatives to. And that could be, for most of us, that's the family, right? For some of us, it's, maybe our business. For some of it's, maybe it's a clan or whatever it is. But like fundamentally, what is your Imperium? What counts as the state is something that is very malleable, and it changes with time. Sometimes the Imperium is very broad, and sometimes it's very narrow. We've just come through a historical epoch where of empires, right? The British Empire that the sun never sets on. It's a global empire, and now we have another global empire that's kind of imploding, and it's going to start shrinking. It is already starting to shrink. It already can't influence everywhere that it used to be able to. So that's going to start shrinking, and when that happens, it starts to shrink very quickly. So this is why I think clannishness is so important. We talked about this with Joel a few years ago on the Imperium cast, about the importance of the clan as a political unit, not just as a religious unit. And I think that's going to be the case going forward. So this is why I've been saying the same things for years, and thankfully guys are starting to listen. Thankfully this is starting to get out there, that we need to build clans. We don't necessarily need to come up with a really strategic way of like capturing the state, the deep state. We certainly don't need to try to get ourselves elected. What we need to do is bite off a little chunk of Imperium at home, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I was just not just, but a couple months back, I was speaking with a guy who was he just retired. He worked in the government, local government in the city of Philadelphia, right? And he was telling me about the Muslim faction there. Muslims have a huge amount of power in the city of Philadelphia, and you would not know it. I mean, you would know it if you go through certain neighborhoods and they sound the thing, what's that? The
call to prayer.
Yeah. And they all fucking come out, and then all of a sudden you're in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But the problem with them is that they clustered into like neighborhoods and have completely taken them over. To the point that they don't talk to police. They don't cooperate with the government. They don't cooperate with anybody. They pay no taxes. They have become this immovable thing that has grown there, this faction. They have bought out the magnet schools. They have they've pretty much just like bought everything that they could. So any kid that even like comes through there that isn't a Muslim will become a Muslim. They have made that. If you go through anything there, you give money to Muslims, you have to bend their rules, Sharia law courts, all that, and you don't see it. Like if you go there and you move there and you live there, first of all, you can't even buy property there because the Muslims own all the property and they buy and sell. They have their own banks, everything. It's completely it's a completely insular enclave that controls their everything. And the city of Philadelphia, the officials there have like they're between a rock and a hard place because they won't negotiate. They can't negotiate with them, but they also can't do anything against them because they control so much stuff that has to do with like imports and business and like all this kind of shit. So they literally just can't do anything except for just kind of ignore them and,
hope they go away.
And basically hope they go away, which they won't.
Which they never will.
No, because
right?
They have so many children, right? Yeah. So it's like and this has happened. They literally landed there in the 80s. In the 80s, dude. In 30-something years. These guys have taken over entire swaths of the city, and very soon they will own the city. Yeah. And all they did was they showed up. They showed up. They got into business. They started quietly making money and buying property, and now they're starting to do their Muslim thing. Now that they're in power, they can do their Muslim thing and beat people up and fucking do corrupt shit. And now they're a problem. But until they got to the point that they had that power, they like were quiet and like nobody knew who they were, and everyone's like, oh, they're fine, they're nice, and blah blah blah, and they get rid of this is what the Muslims do, is that when they move into an area, they chase out the drugs. So everybody that's there, they're like, wow, in the Muslim areas, they fucking don't have any drug dealers. That's because they send guys out to go beat the fuck out of drug dealers and threaten to kill them, and probably actually do kill them in some cases, and all that shit. So it's like they own schools, they have banks, they have fucking everything now. And now they can't be moved. And that is their slice of Imperium.
Exactly. And the question is, why can't we do that? Why can't we do that ourselves? And the answer is, we can. We can do it with heathenry, because heathenry is stronger than Islam. Because Islam, their clan is the Ummah. Their clan is the Muslim community as a whole. And that's too broad. The only reason it works is because there's so few of them right now, right? The only reason why they're so clannish is because they're still a minority, right? But for us, heathenry is inherently clannish, and it tends to, if it's done right, if it's done properly, and if it's done consistently, it tends to insanely advantage like the clan that's practicing it. You know what I mean? So if you're kind of doing it, but you're not swinging your junk around about it and being very public and everything, if you're just, again, quietly building power, quietly starting businesses, quietly employing your own guys, quietly following the law and making bank, then within a couple of generations, we could be in the same position, the same uncancelable position. And in fact, it may actually be better for us, because the government it's got a lot on its plate, and it's only going to have more and more on its plate as it ceases to be able to govern properly, right? So the opportunities will arise. The time to build is now. That's why I get so frustrated with like fucking Twitter activism. Like, okay, good. I'm glad that guys are doing it. It's good because it makes us feel like we're winning. And if we feel like we're winning, then we're going to start to win. You know what I mean? But that is not the end of it, right? The important part is to do in real life shit, is to do family shit, is to build clans, is to build power, is to build businesses, is to build music labels, is to build publishing companies, is to build all of these different things. That is how you win, right? Like there's lots of paths to victory. There's lots of things that need to be done for us to win. But if you're not doing this in real life shit, you're not going to win, right? So that's what the clan is all about. It's about IRL power base building. So, I really just I just see no other path to victory. And it's too bad, because it would be nice. It would be nice if we could say, in 30 years, we're going to have control over our countries again. We're going to be able to do what we want. We're going to have sovereignty over our own lands. We're going to rewind the clock back. It's going to be 1950 again. That would be really nice. Not going to fucking happen, I'm sorry to say. It's going to be a long slog, and we need to start building now, instead of just fruitlessly stubbing our toe on the same rock over and over again, of trying to win elections and all that shit. It's going to be more like what we just talked about, what the Muslims are doing. That's how they've won. That's building Imperium. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Hell yeah. All right, so we're coming up on 3 hours here. We kind of went off the rails a little bit there, but you know what? When you talk about this is something that surrounds Warhammer 40K, is these political ideas. That goes into kind of what we said earlier about how these forms of entertainment and these settings and these games and everything spawn really meaningful conversations and ideas and things around them. Because if you look at Warhammer 40K, it's you have the Emperor. He oversees the Imperium of Man. A guy that gets into that is going to be like, what does Imperium mean, right? And he's going to go down that rabbit hole. He's going to learn what Imperium means. Just knowing what that means is a big deal. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it went off the rails a little bit, but it just goes to show how powerful these cultural things are, these cultural phenomenon, and how we need to create more of them. Right, we got to create more of these cultural phenomenons because and we've said this many times. We're going to say it many more times. People learn through story. People learn through story. People learn through entertainment. People learn through metaphor and demonstration. They don't learn through. You're not. Trust me, as a guy that's like I oversee a little community here. The absolute worst way to try to educate people is here. Read this book. That's that's for somebody that's halfway through the journey. Yeah. You say, here,
people learn by example, right? That's the way to do it.
Watch this movie, read this comic, freaking, whatever, play this game, go play, Total War or Mountain Blade or like fucking whatever, right? That's what teaches people. So if we want to teach people and build and do these kinds of things, number one, these forms of entertainment like Warhammer 40K, they teach people, but that's not the goal of them. The goal of them is just to make fucking cool shit. It's just to make beautiful aesthetics, interesting, fun aesthetics, things that are just like make us feel good and entertain us and XYZ. Just being engrossed in the aesthetics is what it's about, and telling cool stories and having fun and making it part of our culture, right? And number three, these things make money, right? Games Workshop, they're not struggling. The guys that own that, they're not fucking struggling. They're probably guaranteed richer than anybody that we can think of, right? They're fucking, these guys stack cash. So,
and our enemies are really worried that we're going to start being in that position. I recently saw on Twitter some guy, this is the last thing I'll say before we close it out. I recently saw some guy on Twitter, maybe it was you who tweeted it, Dave, I don't know, basically like yelling about how the right can't create culture because it's like entropic and like all this nonsense, right? Like it was just basically this guy sort of like yelling about how we can't do exactly the thing that like Dave is doing with his archives and all of that, like creative, beautiful, aesthetic culture, right? And it was really clear reading his like 4 or 5 tweet thread that he was not trying to convince other people. He was kind of trying to convince himself. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the shit he's saying wasn't making sense. And it was just directly like contradicting things that we know to be true. And it's a cope. Basically, it's just a cope. They know that we're coming for them. They know that the culture dads are coming to take back video games, to take back literature, to take back music and all of this beautiful stuff. We've already come for their philosophy. We've already come for their history. Now we're coming for the rest of the shit. And they are very fucking scared about that. They should be scared because the future looks a lot more like Warhammer 40K than it does like, Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, Wizards of the Coast. Fucking pedophiles. Yeah, don't even, that's oh my God, Wizards of the Coast. It's a can of worms. We're going to shut it down before I start bitching. Yo, fucking hail Saint Gygax, may peace be upon him. Fuck Wizards of the Coast. That's all I got to say. So anyway, this was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun, talking about this and Warhammer 40K. I'm probably not the best guy to be the expert on the panel on Warhammer 40K, but I like it a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. And you guys that have not checked it out, go look up it was like a one-man project on YouTube. It was like an indie project called Hell's Reach with one L, Hell's Reach. And check out the Imperium of Man from the YouTube channel Lutin09, which is Luetin 09. Go watch his Imperium of Man video essays. I know the meme is that white people like video essays, and we do because they're fucking great. So go check that out. And dude, just dive into it and like read about it. There's great books. Horus Heresy has great books. You're gonna fucking have so much fun with it. It's great stuff. And the tabletop game, it's expensive. It's an expensive hobby, and but if you got some buddies that play it, go give it a try, man. Getting together with your boys and setting it up. Dude, there's some guys that really, really go nuts with, they build their own like environments and buildings and everything like that. And they make this big giant war game out of it. And it's a lot of rules, and it's it's big learning curve, but boy, is it fun. It is a lot of fun. It's creativity and strategy and analytics and history and aesthetics. And it's like everything we like all combined. So you ever get the chance to go play it, go give it a try. I guarantee you're going to have some fun. So Warhammer 40K at the end of the day, based, hail to the Emperor, and all that stuff. So guys, we appreciate you guys. Shout out to our patrons, Kazilkum Cruiser and Marvin from AFD. Love and blessings to all you culture dads out there. Thank you so much for supporting us and helping us keep the lights on. If you're not signed up already, make sure to go over to culturedads.com or imperiumpress.org/podcast and go get signed up to the Gumroad so you get Culture Dads every single week, as well as wonderful perks like hardback books of the Western Canon series and beyond. You're going to love it. Go get signed up. You can't beat it. So check that out. You want to buy some base fiction, go over to thebizarchives.com. Follow us on Twitter and Telegram at thebizarchives. And until next time, I'll see you guys here on Culture Dad's Age of Sword and Cassette.